The fish in the water is silent. The animals on the earth are noisy. The bird in the air is singing. But man has in him the silence of the sea, the noise of the earth, and the music of the air. Rabindranath Tagore. Also, screw the love guru. God, jeez. Ah, this is gonna hurt. And welcome back to Critically Acclaimed, the podcast where highbrow and lowbrow collide.
Ow, my foot.
Oh, I was aimed a little low with that explosion this time.
You just
got your foot.
Lobbed it gently underhand.
Whoops. Hey, everybody. My name is William Bibbiani. I'm a film critic. Everybody calls me Bibbs.
My name is Witney Seibold. I, too, am a film critic. And people call me Rabindranath Tagore.
That's right. We like to begin every episode with like a little mic check. We have a little fun with it, a little bit. Usually we do a line of dialogue from like the so-called bad movie that we're reviewing every single week. And I was looking at like every line of dialogue from The Love Guru. And I was like, we're not saying that. I don't want to say that. I don't want to actually, like, none of it.
I will get into my commentary on the dialogue in The Love Guru in a moment, but it celebrates the juvenile in a pretty intense way, and we'll get into it in a little bit.
And in a way that doesn't work, to be fair. We're not saying everything juvenile is bad, because we believe that highbrow and lowbrow can collide.
Indeed.
And we will talk more about them.
A mixture of the high and the low is typically the best.
This week on Critically Acclaimed, we will also be reviewing the new releases Red Sparrow and Death Wish.
And that's it.
What a weekend.
I've been on vacation, so it's been tough to get out to see the movies.
Well, it's not a huge weekend for new releases because as well. It's kind of just those two for the most part.
It is Oscar weekend.
It is.
And indeed, last week, as you may have recalled, we made an Oscar bet.
That's right.
We tried to guess as many categories as we could in the Oscars. Whoever loses will have to do a commentary track for the movie they themselves declared to be the worst of 2017.
Now, just to remind everybody, what was your pick for the worst movie 2017?
The Book of Henry.
And my pick was Transformers: The Last Night. Now, here's the thing.
So we're kind of screwed either way here.
No, here's the deal. Like, we're going to do a commentary track together regardless. It's just a matter of who will suffer slightly more, because I think both of those films wound up on each of our bottom 10 lists.
That's true.
So whoever wins, we lose.
It's just like AVP Alien versus Predator.
I had a lot of people, like, after we announced that wager, like, tweet me or send me a message. Why do you do this to yourselves? And I was like, don't ask me questions I can't answer. I don't know. I don't know why we do this.
Here's my question for you. Why don't you do that to yourselves? It's fun. It can be exhilarating. It's like cutting a hole in the ice and getting in first thing in the morning, like the Polar Bear Club. It's brisk.
It's cinematic bungee jumping. Like, there's something to get out of it, but you're probably going to die. Like, it's not... it's like you're taking a calculated risk with your sanity.
Cinematic bungee jumping, but you tied the knot yourself.
Because here's the thing. If we do a commentary track for those movies, we're not just going to, like, do a random commentary track. That means we have to watch it at least one more time beforehand so that we have really good things to say.
Yeah.
Like, we can tell you about every single scene and why every single scene pretty much in either of those films doesn't work. So that's going to be brutal regardless. That'll come out sometime in the month of March, and it will be available on the Schmoedown iTunes feed and the SK Plus YouTube channel for free. You don't do anything extra for that.
You may have noticed, however, that as you listen to this episode, that the Oscars are already going on.
And if not already over.
You may have seen them already. So you know better than we do who lost this bet.
Yeah,
we're recording this before Oscar Sunday.
Well, our episodes go live on Sunday morning, and the Oscars are announced Sunday night. We toyed with maybe waiting an extra day for the podcast, but screw it. We might do a small bonus episode next week when we just talk about the Oscars for like half an hour or whatever. But worst case scenario, we'll just cover the Oscars in a week. So if you want to hear our predictions, that's in the last episode, and keep an eye on the wager, because no matter what happens, it's going to suck. For us, you will hopefully be entertained. And if you haven't seen those movies, it'll still be a fun commentary track. Think of it as a podcast all about one movie in which we go through it in chronological order. Also this week, you may have noticed that I was on the movie Trivia Schmoedown.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me about this Schmoedown.
Well, you see, they take people from the internet and they put them on
There are people in the internet?
They're right there inside. You can crack it open.
The internet?
Thank you, Zoolander. See, that's good silliness. Yeah, so they take everyone from the internet and they put them on a thing and they ask them movie questions, and then we do fun stuff with like amusing introductions and smack talk as well. I've been doing it for a while, and on my first ever Schmoedown, I got every question right. I broke records.
Very nice.
Everybody was sort of just like, ooh, who is this guy? And I was like Al Bundy. I scored 3 touchdowns in one game. And then I just faded. I haven't lost every game since. And actually, if you look at my stats, I'm pretty good. But I just cannot eke out the wins. This week was pretty brutal. If you want to hear a whole bunch of commentary about how the Schmoedown went, you want to go to another podcast on the Schmoes No channel and on the SK Plus YouTube channel. Called the Schmoedown Rundown. That's like 2 hours of straight Schmoedown commentary about my match, the other matches this week, the show in general. It's a lot of fun. Those guys are awesome. I just want to give them a shout out. If you only listen to one show, listen to the other one as well. It's fun.
Because you're on it.
Yeah.
If you can't get enough of Bibbs.
Who can?
And who can?
Right?
Go over to the Schmoedown Rundown.
Actually, to be perfectly honest, and I talk a little about this on the other podcast, the Schmoedown is kind of messed with my, like, how competitive I am. Like, I got, like, last year when I thought maybe I could do really, really well at this, I got kind of, like, competitive, like, ooh, sports. And since I just started losing really consistently, I've had to ask myself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to win, or am I doing this because I enjoy movie trivia and, like, performing? And the answer is the latter.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit more zen about the actual competition part. I still want to win. Who wouldn't want to win? It's a game, but like I'm going to tone it way the hell down. I'm just going to have a good time. This year. I
really enjoy losing myself. So when I lose a bunch, you'll know that it's really pleasing me on some deep masochistic level.
That's not true. You want to win just as much as anybody. I've seen you on that show. You're very good on that show.
I would love.
Very competitive.
Thank you. I would love to win, but I'm at peace with losing.
There you go. It's a weird scenario. I'm looking forward to seeing you. I know we can't talk too much about future events, but have you talked to Christian about doing your first singles match?
It's been mentioned. Okay. Some things are in the pipeline, and that's all I'm allowed to say.
And sure enough, sooner or later, Critically Acclaimed will return as a team, and I think we complement each other very well. You're very handsome.
Thank you very much. You've never robbed a bank.
That is a compliment. Thank you. It's hard to resist, isn't it?
I know. You go in, it's like the vault door's just right there.
Already open. They're just like, come on in.
You know what? I do love your shirt today. That is awesome.
It's a nice little blue Hawaiian number, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's pretty good. All right, let's talk about some movies. Am I forgetting anything? No, that's it.
No, that's it.
Okay.
We didn't mention I guess we mentioned we're going to be talking about the Love Guru, but we'll save the B feature for a little later.
That's the main event. Let's talk about the new releases this week. And the new releases this week are really, really weird. I feel like they're the perfect double feature, and I would also never want to see them back to back because they're both films that deal with issues of not just violence, but suffering.
Yeah.
And they're both films which I think kind of airball that topic to an extent that I didn't care for either. But let's start with the one that we both saw.
Okay.
Let's talk about Red Sparrow. It's a new film directed by Francis Lawrence, who did all of the Hunger Game movies except for the first one.
Yeah.
And it reunites him with Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence plays a Russian spy who initially is a ballet dancer, but it turns out her uncle works for the secret government espionage service, and she is brought into the fold because one of her fans has a bunch of information. He asks her to seduce this guy. It goes extremely bad, and now she has witnessed a murder, and her choices are death or go to sexy spy school. And by sexy, I mean not sexy at all. Because it's all about dehumanizing yourself so that you can become this.
You can essentially become a prostitute for the government.
Yeah, you can take anyone who the government wants secrets from, regardless of whether their proclivities are vanilla or horrific. And you can shut down any part of your brain that says no and just do that and then give secrets to the state. And then she joins that organization and she ends up embroiled in a twisty-turny plot of twisty-turny turns. And that's the basic plot. But for me, the biggest issue with this movie is tone, because there are two different ways to do this movie. One of them is sort of the broad entertainment James Bond sexy spy thriller, in which you kind of put all of the really harsh, kind of disturbing elements of the storyline off to one side, and you just treat it like a James Bond movie.
Stick them in a drawer, because James Bond is rife with that.
It is, but they gloss over a lot of that.
Especially some of those earlier ones.
Especially some of the earlier ones. But they do their best to try to make it palatable. Or you can take it really, really seriously, and you can focus on just how heavy and brutal and disturbing and disgusting a lot of the things that go on in this narrative are. But you can't do both. If you try to add grossness to the fun bit, it's not fun anymore. And if you try to add fun to the gross bit, it looks like you're a monster.
I think there's actually a third way you can do this too. There's the Golden Eye approach. There's the Night Porter approach.
Yeah.
And then there's the sort of Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS, like Love Camp 7 approach.
The
like
Grindhouse
Euro sleaze, like practically pornography type
But to
approach.
get away with that today, you need an exceptionally deft hand, and I don't think they're even remotely. And also, I don't think that's one they're trying for. No, I think they're trying to do both of the other things. I don't think they're trying for exploitation.
It's not, but that's all I read. The scenario was straight up Love Camp 7. In fact, what's the name of like the special sex camp that they all go? They call it like Secret Bureau 4 or something like that. And she even refers to it as whore school.
And you brought up the Night Porter, which I think someone in the film saw, because Charlotte Rampling
is in this.
What is the Night Porter for people who haven't seen it? Because it's a strange film. It might be hard to watch, but it's noteworthy.
It's a World War II, like post World War II film about people who have picked up kind of Nazi fetishes through the suffering that they've suffered at the hands of the Nazis.
And it's about a woman who is a Holocaust survivor, and at one of these, in this community, she actually runs across one of the Nazis who tortured her. But it's outside of the war, and they actually explore that dynamic. That is a harsh storyline to deal with. But Red Sparrow is a big, expensive spy movie starring Jennifer Lawrence and Joel Edgerton, and it is trying to be palatable. Yeah. And it is. I don't think it is. And that's my biggest problem with it. I just think it ends up shooting itself in the foot.
I think it's fine that it's not palatable. It's rare that we see big Hollywood films that are kind of this sour, and I think it was doing all of that kind of deliberately. It was trying to do something, for goodness sake, kind of shocking, and it wasn't shocking. It just came across as kind of blandly exploitative, and a little and definitely a little gross. That it's not going to make you comfortable. Luckily, over the course of the film, we learn that she never buys into any of that. She's forced into this really horrible situation where she's asked by her government to essentially subsume her own mind, her own personality, her own body for the sake of the state. And she never does it and takes control using her own gumption and her own genuineness. It's actually her own honesty and her truthfulness that gets her through all of this. So it's essentially about how wicked that system is and how she uses it to redeem herself and come out on the other side.
I think there's a difference between... I've had a conversation about this a fair amount recently, and about the idea of what's a movie about? And how is it about it? Yeah. And those are two issues that kind of need to be balanced for a movie to be truly effective, I think.
This is one of Ebert's old things.
Yeah, it's
a movie is not what it's not about what it's about, it's how it's about it.
Right, exactly. So you can have an example I use of this is actually, and it's a weird analogy, I know, but you look at something like Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. Everything about the production, it is cheap. It's kind of
yes, it is.
It's exceptionally cheap. A lot of there's a bunch of stupid asides with like aerobics and like just means nothing. And it's Lenny is a stupid 1980s cliche. Lenny Luthor, Lex Luthor's nephew.
I love his car though.
The way it is about its storyline is terrible. But look at the actual storyline in Superman 4. It's a good setup for a Superman movie where the Daily Planet, under new management, challenges Superman, says, hey, you're here to protect humanity? Why are you stopping bank robbers? Why aren't you solving our real problems?
Like nuclear proliferation the film was made.
So Superman decides to stop nuclear proliferation, but the problem is bunch of fascist dictators and weapons manufacturers the world over depend on these sorts of weapons for a living, for their economy to thrive. So they hire Lex Luthor to create a sort of a nuclear proliferation against Superman, a nuclear man. And indeed, Superman's attempts to de-arm the world end up arming them even more with a more powerful weapon that Superman has to fight all over the world, creating the exact kind of devastation a nuclear war might make. That is a good idea. It's not a good movie.
They didn't have the ideas, the script, or the money to back up that idea. But that's a good idea.
The fundamental, like, what it's about is actually pretty good. How it is about it is bad. Now, Red Sparrow is slick, and the production design on this movie is fantastic. It's really well shot. The cast is all good, even though I think they have varying degrees of little to work with. I think Matthias Schoenaerts is a really good, sleazy, creepy villain in this. I like him a lot.
Was he the uncle? Or
He's
was
the
he
uncle.
Okay, yeah.
Joel Edgerton is one of those actors who you give him the right material, he's fantastic, and if you don't, you get, like, Kings and Prophets or whatever that Ridley Scott movie was.
Yeah.
Gods and Kings?
Gods and Kings.
Gods and Kings, and he's just wrong.
Where he plays Ramses. Come on.
He's I feel like he's miscast here. I think he needed someone a bit more outwardly charismatic, and Joel Edgerton's just more of a
He's too down to earth.
He's a character actor.
Yeah,
He's not really gonna, like, you know, ooh, like, you just want someone who's alluring. You want, like, a Cary Grant type for that. But yeah, all these little pieces are okay, but it's all a matter of the way the material is handled. And I think the key thing for me that shows, like, how Red Sparrow, I appreciate that you got something out of it. I'm glad someone did, because I'm not alone on this. But regardless, for me, it boils down to one performance towards the end of
Mary Louise Parker.
Mary Louise Parker shows up. She
offers some actual levity to this whole dour proceeding.
Exactly. She is an assistant to an American politician who is willing to turn herself over to the Russian government for money. And what we find out when we finally spend some time with her, she's going to do this whole arrangement where here are these floppy disks, which is a great little thing because they're not like...
You can't trace a floppy.
Yeah, exactly, which is kind of clever, actually. She's going to give them all this information in exchange for a ton of money. Okay, I could wrap my head around that.
Well, and also they have compromat on her. They have pictures of her in compromising situations.
Fair enough, but she's not just doing it to do... She's also getting money out of it, and she's excited about the money part. And in fact, she's very bitter about her job, and the entire transaction, she is incredibly drunk.
Like, she starts a little drunk and gets drunker.
Yeah, she keeps having, like, these like, really, like, murderous Russian spies make her drinks. Yeah. Because she thinks she has the power in this situation. And she gets drunker and drunker and drunker. And she is, you're right, there springs so much levity to it. And the movie can't handle levity. Levity is wrong here. The story is so grievous and grimy that levity felt out of place, even though, in a vacuum, that's a fun scene.
It's a fun scene. I'm glad that we had an alternate perspective on this. I think casting somebody more charming in the male lead role would have been kind of death to this film, because it would have made too much light of kind of the heavier stuff.
I'm not saying they shouldn't like actually deal with the drama seriously. I just think you need someone who's got a bit more charisma, because we spend so much time with Jennifer Lawrence and she owns it. She's good. She does what she has to do. Like, he has less screen time, and so he really needs to make more of an impact faster. That's my point.
Yeah, I can see, however, why anybody making this film this year would make it with that particular tone, because this is about Russian spies in Russia, learning about Russian spy techniques today in the modern day.
A lot of it has kind of a timeless quality, where until they bring up technology, you feel like this could be the 90s.
It could have easily have been the Cold War, but you know, there's multiple allusions to the president. That's Vladimir Putin, and there's talk of, like, maybe some American, like, how she might flip to the American side, and she might be helping out some of the American spies, or somebody else might be helping out some American spies. And you realize that the Americans and the Russians are kind of cozied up. And you look at the headlines, and you realize how American politicians and Russian politicians might be a little cozy, and how, you know, the money is actually changing hands. And you do begin to realize that if you played that light, it would seem so much cheaper and dumber and unrealistic compared to what's just in the newspapers.
I realize that, but I also think
they're making a play on current events. But this is a commentary on American politics and the way we've been sort of dilly-dallying about with the Russian government.
I think, and you got to remember, this movie wasn't made in the last couple of months and released. They've been working on this for a while. In
timely.
fact, I interviewed Francis Lawrence when the last Hunger Games movie came out, and he was talking about making this movie. So this was in plans before our current political situation. Here's the thing. I feel like it's almost timely. If it had come out a year and a half ago, it would have been timely. Now, there's a lot of plot elements in it that address that don't work. Like, there's a whole bit about how, we can't go after the Americans too strongly or they'll kill all our agents in the field. You know how badass the Americans are and how they won't take any shit from Russia.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
right.
You probably want to, change that dialogue slightly now.
Change the dialogue. Just pay them off. They'll take anything. Yeah, whatever.
Maybe that's cynical, but, the idea that America is this take-no-shit country that has a absolute no-tolerance policy for anything Russia does in an espionage environment, that doesn't quite feel the same right now.
That's the Cold War stuff that they're just carrying over.
Yeah.
But when you take the background of the buzz of modern current events and you put it underneath this film, there's all this talk of the brave Americans out in the field and how they're such badasses, and underneath all of that is no. We're not necessarily the good guys in this situation. We're not standing up for some sort of great ideal in this situation. And it adds, I think, this wonderful depth of cynicism to the entire proceedings, which matches the tone that they had on screen.
See, my thing is this. I just feel like the tone is inconsistent. I think they try to address the stuff you talk about, but I think by also trying to have these cool, kind of exotic, sexy scenes at, swimming pools and stuff. Right after, by the way, Jennifer Lawrence bleached her hair, which there's no way she's going anywhere near chlorine. Her hair's going to be bright green.
Yeah.
There's no way. I just don't. I know it's a little thing, but that's not some weird, obscure, computer thing where only you have to be an expert to know that. That's just if you've ever known anyone who bleached their hair, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm amazed no one on the set said, maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should come up with another. Okay, that's fine. Fine.
They're too distracted by this Versace bikini thing she's wearing, which a random translator in the middle of Hungary would definitely own.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It looks like it has to be it looks like in order to put it on, you have to solve a Rubik's cube.
You have to
I don't understand
fold it
how
and twist it and get one shoulder and then flip over backwards.
There's a weird silent movie comedy routine of just trying to figure out how to put this piece of clothing on. I don't. That might be me. I don't know.
Harold Lloyd has to disguise himself, and there's this big routine of how he ends up tying himself to the wall.
Here's the thing. Ultimately, this movie just it just pushed me away. Every time I wanted to get on its wavelength, because seriously, once you get past her the weird school run by Charlotte Rampling, once you get past that, it's actually a relatively straightforward spy movie.
Yeah.
But
which by the way you can follow, which I appreciate.
You can follow it, but here's the thing: I didn't find it very interesting from that point on, because at that point I'm kind of soured on the whole proceedings and I'm just feeling uncomfortable. Well, it's just but even then, I don't think it's a particularly interesting spy movie. There's not that much at stake beyond what has already happened to the protagonist, which is already atrocious. Everything else feels smaller than that, and I didn't get into it.
The pace was really slow. This is a 2 hour and 20 minute film.
Yeah.
You can fit it into 2 hours easily.
Oh, I think you could fit it in much less.
Yeah. And
there's a 100-minute version of this that's not bad.
But something I did notice is, she suffers at the beginning of the film. She goes to this horrific sex training camp, and she moves out, and she's expected to be essentially everybody's sex kitten.
Yeah, and for the state, for
the state, and they cast a pretty young Hollywood actress, Jennifer Lawrence, to be everybody's sex kitten, and that's the way magazines treat our young starlets. Every one of them is a sex kitten. It doesn't matter. That's just how we're going to dress them.
Look at any red carpet.
Yeah,
here on today, any female movie star is asked about what they're wearing. You look amazing. There's objectification everywhere.
Yeah. And that's just what, unfortunately, what Hollywood is doing. Let's hope it reduces.
Let's hope that gets better.
But she's in this situation where she's, her character is meant to be. She goes and meets any man or any woman, it has to be their ultimate sex partner. She's essentially a porn fantasy, which is what the camp is all about. You have to be everybody's porn fantasy, right? You have to know exactly what they want and do it. Doesn't matter if it's, like you said, vanilla or kinky.
One of the things they talk about when they're even researching Joel Edgerton is they talk about what kind of porn he likes to watch, because that's useful information to her.
He likes vanilla stuff.
He's not interesting.
They even comment on it.
Yeah,
there's nothing weird in his porn cache.
Yeah.
But every time she's in a situation where she's expected to fulfill that fantasy the way she's been trained, she never does it.
Yeah.
She always finds a way to take control of the situation. And I think that's what Francis Lawrence was trying to, and what Jennifer Lawrence clearly is trying to say in this story. That this is a world of lies and exploitation, and she's not willing to do either of those things. And she succeeds as a result. And in this world of dishonesty, being at least a little honest and being forthright and standing up for yourself is going to be the revolutionary act that gets you ahead. And that's kind of optimistic, despite the dour tone throughout. I don't think it comes not across. A fun film, again, but there's some stuff in there.
I think that's in the text if you want to rip it out just kind of in a vacuum objectively. I don't think the movie sells it very well because it always comes right back around, because the movie always comes right back around to sort of a leering state. The movie is inviting the audience to look at her the way that her marks would.
Yeah.
And I understand why you do that. That's in the narrative, but ultimately I do feel it undermines whatever positive message you're trying to get out of it. So I don't think it comes across. I don't think it works. And ultimately I think it ends up kind of undermining whatever message it could have had. By kind of giving in to this sort of just kind of base prurience that I just don't think works. It's a shame because I think the material, there's something to the material, but like this is a film that I don't think is gonna, I think a lot of people aren't gonna be entertained by just because of its ugliness. And I think that ugliness, when it's trying to be slick, when it's trying to be cool, a lot of the time it is gonna kind of shoot its own message again in the foot. I don't think it works, and I think it's a bad production overall. Even though there are individual elements, again, that might function. So that's me.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on too much cool, and I appreciate things that don't try for cool anymore because I've seen enough. She dresses in cool gowns, but there's never like that scene where she does like a spin kick or something.
Well, no, that's an exaggeration. It's not about being badass. I'm not saying badass. What I'm saying is it feels like, you said yourself, it feels like a magazine spread. It feels luscious as opposed to real in any way for me, and I think the realism is kind of what it needed in order to get those messages.
I think it kind of pushed against that a little bit, and enough to make it tolerable for me. I know I'm in the minority. This isn't getting very good reviews, and this isn't. I'm not head over heels about this.
We're having a debate.
Yeah,
that's all there is to it. Let's talk about the other film that I feel kind of airballs the conversation about violence. Which is Death Wish. Now, Death Wish is a remake.
I've seen 5 Death Wish movies, and this is the 7th. If you count Death Sentence, the one with Kevin Bacon.
Right. Which was forgetting about that. Which I haven't seen that one.
Which was it was based on the same novel that Death Wish was based on.
Was it based on the sequel novel, actually,
or maybe technically? It's the same character. It's Paul Kersey.
All right. The original Death Wish, based on a novel. Original Death Wish, directed by Michael Winner, who directed, I think, about half of the sequels.
He did
Death 2 and 3, right? Maybe 4?
I think he did 1, 2. He did Death Wish 3, and that's the important one. Death Wish 3 is
the wildly irresponsible one. I think 2 does it as well, but Death Wish 1 stars Charles Bronson as an architect named Paul Kersey.
And they cast Charles Bronson.
They did.
Because he's 100% convincing as an architect.
Well, we're going to talk about Bruce Willis as a doctor in a minute.
Oh, God.
But, okay, so you got Charles Bronson, who was a tough guy, but he was not the kind of tough guy we would get, like, in the 80s. He was the tough guy we got in, like, the 60s and 70s, the kind of war veteran, world-weary tough guy.
Older man. Tough older man set in his ways, unwilling to change for this stupid new world.
And it's actually, for Charles Bronson, it's actually a rather good performance, because at the beginning of the movie, he's kind of meek. He exists in this very safe world. He's got a wife, got a daughter. They're fine. They're happy. And, the 70s were a tumultuous time, at least from the perspective of a lot of people. There was a lot of crime rates seemed to be rising. The idea that Miranda rights were now like the most important element of the judicial process was still relatively new at the time.
Yeah.
And there was this anxiety that criminals were getting more rights than the cops had to prosecute them or to catch them. Therefore, is our society going to go completely to the dogs? That ended up not really being how it worked, but like that was the anxiety that Death Wish and like Dirty Harry explored.
Dirty Harry is more like explicitly about that, but it's definitely part of Death Wish as well.
Come into the same environment
because it's about how the criminals are able to get away with something.
Exactly.
And that was a conservative. The conservatives pushed against Miranda rights, and liberals pushed for them, and that was sort of one of the big political debates at the time. So a lot of people see these as like super right-wing movies.
Sure. And the original, and here's the thing, the sequels to Death Wish are very right-wing. Death Wish, I feel like, explores the topic with a little, like...
There's at least some ambivalence in the first Death Wish.
There's at least some sensitivity to the idea that it's a complicated issue. And so, in the beginning of Death Wish, Paul Kersey's wife and daughter are attacked and assaulted by...
In their own home.
In their own home by a bunch of criminals, one of whom played by a young Jeff Goldblum in a Jughead hat.
Yep.
Which is weird. And his wife dies, his daughter's in a coma, and Paul Kersey feels helpless, and he ends up over the course of the film deciding to get a gun and take his safety and the safety of others and the law into his own hands because the justice system in his eyes isn't working. And as his nightly vigilante missions progress, and they're never really badass, which I appreciate in the first Death Wish. They're actually kind of intimate and uncomfortable and a little scary, actually.
It's not until part 4 where he's blowing up single individuals with rocket launchers and stuff.
Well, don't forget the Home Alone sequence in 3. Like it gets bigger real fast. But like in this first one, you know, there's an element of tragedy to it. It looks at the toll violence takes on people who are victims of violence and people who perpetrate violence as well. I'm not going to call it a deep movie, but I appreciate that at least it tried.
It did try.
Then in the sequels, and this is a lot like Rambo, where you look at the First Blood and how it's actually a rather pointed and observant story about how people who went to war, lived through horrific violence, are trying not to be violent anymore, and how they get kind of pushed into that, and isn't that a tragedy? And then in the sequels, it was...
We're going to hire you to be violent
and
now.
The sequels are going to blow up helicopters with arrows. Isn't it cool? And I'm like, that
wasn't the point, guys.
It might have been cool if you didn't start with First Blood, but you did. So it's really weird. So the Death Wish sequels, which end up basically being Paul Kersey has the right to kill everybody. It's great.
And
it ends up being really weird.
By the third movie, he moves out of town and he just is blowing up gang members. And setting up like
the police practically hire him to it's weird.
They turn a blind eye. Like gives machine guns to the old people and all these apart. God, it's such a weird, horrifically irresponsible movie. It is way entertaining,
and I think it really helps to have a sort of a background about not just what people remember Death Wish as being, but what Death Wish actually kind of was, and how it evolved over time. Because Eli Roth's remake of Death Wish, from a plot perspective, has a lot more to do with the original Death Wish. Tonally, it's Death Wish 2 or 3. And so as a result, it feels like a weird mixed bag.
Eli Roth, he's an exploitation guy. He makes
that's what he does.
He makes homages to stuff like Cannibal Holocaust. That's his.
He's not a subtle director.
In fact, did you see The Green Inferno?
I did not see. That was the one I didn't see.
The Green Inferno, over the credits says, if you like The Green Inferno, you might like these other schlocky Italian cannibal films that I'm inspired by. Like, he actually has a bibliography of what he's quoting.
I can appreciate that.
You would wish my boss, Quentin Tarantino, would do the same thing. Here's all the films I was quoting. Go watch all of these.
But here's the thing: like, there's an argument to be made for there's a fun version of Death Wish to be made. Certainly, the political climate right now is really not a good time for it. But let's take that out of the equation right now and just look at how it deals with itself.
Okay.
Because what the story is Paul Kersey, now played by Bruce Willis, as an emergency room doctor. And I have never seen Bruce Willis sleepier than when he's pretending to be an emergency room doctor in the midst of his duties. He is so just like, he's like cutting people open and it's just like, what did I have for lunch today?
Oh, yeah. Wait, what am I doing again? Gallbladder. Something, I forgot.
Gallbladder.
Is this thing the gallbladder?
God, I wonder if the Mother of Dragons will ever get together with Kit Harington on Game of Thrones. Like, that's how engaged he is in being a doctor. He so doesn't care. He's married to Elizabeth Shue. His daughter is going to go off to college. Seems like everything's great. And then they're at a restaurant celebrating her recent high school graduation, and they go to the valet guy, who is a Latino, and they give him the keys. And as they give him the keys, they mention like, "Oh yeah, we're going to be out on Saturday night at 7 p.m." And then the camera like zooms in while ominous music plays on the valet, and you're just like, "Wow, Jesus, Eli, fucking tone it down, even for you." And then like,
did he look at the keys and go?
He might as well. Like he goes into, when he's taking out the car, he looks at their like what do you call it? He looks at their GPS in the car. Like they have one of those built-in deals, and how he looks at like home, which always is weird for me. Like, you don't know where you live. Like, you should be able to get back home. It's going from home elsewhere. Issue.
You're out and you want to go home. You just hit home, and it'll give you directions back home.
I feel like it's your neighborhood. You should probably know that. But that's probably fine. I don't have one of those. It strikes me. If that was the movie's biggest problem, it would be brilliant. That's my thing. That's nitpicking of the highest order. That's fine. I'm not even complaining about that. Paul Kersey is called out on a hospital job. Someone's sick. He has to go to the emergency room. And Elizabeth Shue and her daughter are attacked. And I will actually give Eli Roth credit. The home invasion in the remake is actually less horrifying than in the original.
Yeah, they actually show it in the original.
It's really brutal. I mean, it doesn't escalate even as far as it goes in the original. It's still really, really bad. And it totally, like, explains why, like, okay, he doesn't feel safe anymore, blah. Yeah. It does its job, but it's actually less disgusting than the original. And I was actually like, maybe this movie isn't going to be that bad. Maybe it's going to be somewhat tacky. I kind of expect that from Eli Roth. He's not a subtle filmmaker, but maybe we're gonna be okay. And then the police are trying to investigate it, and this is Chicago. There's a lot of violence. There's a chance we might not make it, but we're gonna keep trying. And after a while, Bruce Willis, his daughter's in a coma, his wife is dead. Doesn't feel safe, decides to get himself a gun, and he goes to like a gun store, and the gun store is just like, everything is super above board and safe. You gotta have a lot of paperwork. We're gonna be able to trace all your bullets. And he's just like, well...
Speaking of things that aren't timely.
Yeah, and so he like leaves pointedly, like, oh, well, that's not what I'm interested in right now. And they're just like, okay, bye!
Do you have any revenge guns?
I'm looking for revenge guns. And here's where the movie, here's where the movie becomes, like, right after this. There's a gunshot victim on his table, and he's, trying to save his life. And then the guy's gun falls on the ground, and no one else sees it in this crowded room, and Bruce Willis just sort of kicks it under the table for later. And then he picks up the gun after everyone's gone, and he goes start training with the gun, and then AC/DC's Back in Black starts playing as he is training with his gun, as he is watching YouTube videos about how to clean your gun and how to mess with your cell phone so that no one can mess with it.
Too soon.
It's actually because here's the thing, it's really rah about it, and you could have done something kind of satirical with that, and gone about how there's a sort of irony to this, but it's not.
He goes into the gun shop and they just give it to him like no waiting period.
But it
turns out that's really easy, and that's sort of the dark satire or commentary you're making.
But you could do that, but instead the movie is basically just, this is great.
Yeah.
And I was watching this with an audience, and they were really going rah at the moments the movie was inviting them to go rah in. Like when Bruce Willis does something like horrifically violent, because he starts torturing people after a while, and he is empowered by this. He actually feels better about this. The community, they have radio DJs. Apparently that's the entire media in Chicago is radio DJs. They have morning DJs debating about, is he the greatest thing ever? I don't know. Maybe you tell us. But the movie says yes. There are no negative consequences. There's one guy who gets killed for kind of trying to do the same thing Bruce Willis is doing. But we don't know that guy. He doesn't really read. All we know is that guy's another criminal, like Bruce Willis, because you got to remember, he's taken the law into his own hands. So the idea that we're not going to see this backfire in some way and have something really shitty come out of it is a pretty irresponsible approach. It would be irresponsible at any time, but right now it feels really in poor taste.
I'm wondering why... All right, you said let's leave politics out of it. But no piece of art is apolitical. All art is political. That's just something we have to contend with.
Yeah, and again, remember, even something like Commando is in its own way kind of political, and it is kind of about...
Commando is super political.
But people like to just look at that as a piece of dumb revenge action entertainment where Arnold Schwarzenegger is completely justified in killing 5 million people because they kidnapped his daughter for a weekend. And listen, that's bad. I'm just saying, he kills a ton of people. But he's completely justified because the narrative says he is.
Yeah.
Here, here, though, they actually do touch upon the possibility that he's not, and then they just let it sit there. And there's no, like, if you need to make that work, you need to make it really cartoonish. You need to show that the police are super incompetent. And they don't. And in fact, there's a big plot point in the middle. Much like that gun incident, this movie relies entirely on coincidences in order to keep going, which is really frustrating. But there's a thing that happens about halfway through the movie that sends the plot, like, kind of kicking into high gear. And Bruce Willis has two options. He can tell the police, or he can do it himself.
Okay.
And one thing that is sort of borne out over the course of the film is that if he had told the police probably would have solved everything, and he literally didn't have to do anything. He did not have to kill anybody.
Tell the police.
The justice probably would have prevailed, and that would have been that.
You know what? It sounds to me like when the first Death Wish came out, the Charles Bronson film, it came out when crime was at an all-time high, and these Miranda rights seemed to be geared in many people's minds towards getting criminals off, like being too lenient,
and that was a bad thing.
And that was a bad thing.
That's like,
and that was a bad
thing. Protection under the law.
People do need protection, but a lot of people saw Miranda rights as a means of putting criminals back on the streets more quickly.
Yeah,
and people were really frustrated by the crime they continued to see, and the temptation to take the law into your own hands was always there. It was born out of a very real frustration in the world, in this country.
Regardless of whether or not
whether or not that's moral is another issue.
Yeah, but that was the conversation being had.
Yeah, that was where this came from. What's going on in America right now that we need Death Wish? What are we frustrated about? What do we want to kill? Twitter bots? I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely frustration in the world, but it seems to be really misplaced at the world in general. And it seems to me like a revenge fantasy film like Death Wish can only be this kind of rah-rah thing because it is catering to the lowest of our violent impulses, which is really has bubbled to the surface in the last year or so.
And really, if you think about it, like the idea that we talk about, like, is this a mental health issue? Is this a guns issue? Death Wish kind of covers both because he is not mentally well. He's clearly unhealthy. So that's a problem as well. Also, it's incredibly easy for him to get a gun legally and illegally. And the movie kind of allows for both of that. And that there is an entire culture out there that he has easy access to that encourages this behavior.
Yeah.
And that over the course of the film, there's one point in the film where someone actually does find out what's going on. They do find out, like, what he is doing. And their first reaction isn't, Paul, we got to get you help.
Yeah.
Paul, this is not good. You've gone way too far, and we need to help you. We need to help you so that you don't hurt yourself or other people anymore. Instead, their response is, how do we keep you out of jail? And I'm like, that's not the attitude. Because, like, one of the things we have to deal with here is because Death Wish is so simple and intimate. This isn't Commando. This isn't like, another country has come to America and stolen our teenagers and killed our secret agents and we have to stop them. That's a big fucking deal and it justifies an over-the-top response. This is plausible violence. And the movie says that, and not only an implausible, but an extremely unhealthy, ugly way to handle it is the best possible solution in this scenario, and it fucking celebrates it. And that's hard.
Golly, what an ugly film you're describing.
It's not a good film. And I realize that, like, some people say, well, it's only a movie. Well, I'm not sure it is, because the thing is that there's talk about how do violent movies and violent video games inspire violence. And I think directly, no. If you see a movie and that inspires you to hurt somebody, you were probably just about to do it anyway, and something was going to push you over the edge. But and my wife was pointing this out, and I was talking to her, and she put it very succinctly. Movies don't, like, inspire violence, but what they do is reinforce, and introduce social norms. What is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And this movie has some very particular ideas about what is acceptable in very familiar situations that a lot of people actually deal with. And it's at least arguably in very poor taste.
Yeah, that's been my big beef with a lot of the YA adaptations that have come over the last decade. It's just, we're selling violence to teenagers, explaining to them that their angst can be cured by military murder, essentially. Like putting a machine gun in your hands and going out and killing the man. I understand the catharsis that offers to an immature person, but that's not a healthy message to be saying. Yeah, when it comes to, like, violent media and the consumption thereof, does it cause violence? there's debates on this.
Yeah.
I don't think they do.
I don't think there's any concrete evidence that suggests it, because otherwise we'd have a lot more.
think in a household where an unsupervised person, like a young person, is allowed to watch as much violent crap as they like without having any conversations about it, that can lead to what you were talking about, it can lead them to societies or mindsets that they can encounter outside of that media where they think that's a good solution.
Where they think that's acceptable.
Yeah. So there's push and pull in this debate.
There needs to be conversations about it. Because listen, no one is pretending that movies aren't powerful. We've seen propaganda films that have had both incredibly positive and insanely negative effects.
Yeah. I think in an era when everybody's really angry, a revenge fantasy film of this nature might not be acceptable.
A plausible nature.
Yeah.
That's the thing that really makes it
plausible,
weird.
yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm just going to say it right now. Okay. Let's say for whatever reason this is the movie for you and you're seething at us for taking some sort of moral stance on it. On one hand, you got to remember that reviewing movies is not the same as reviewing like a product. It's not the same like the car runs, therefore it's good. It exists in a cultural environment, and on some level it is our responsibility to have what we would consider good taste. And if our taste doesn't match yours, there are other critics out there, and that's fine. So there's that element as well. But for a moment, let's remove all politics from it and then just look at it as a revenge thriller. Let's imagine it came out 10 years ago when all of this seemed a little less...
In terms of like filmmaking and functionality, how does it play?
Barely straight to video. Like, it's better shot than straight to video, but like, and there's a couple of moments of like where it's like, oh, that's kind of a cool, like, that gunshot was framed kind of neat. This is not a very well written movie. It's very simplistic. Again, the plot is fucking on a thread. Vincent D'Onofrio was in this movie, and I could not tell you why. There is no reason for his character. He plays Bruce Willis's brother.
He shows up via Skype and says, "You've got a bagul problem."
I had a theory that maybe they were going to do this kind of twist in the original narrative, and then maybe it would be this kind of tragedy, and then his brother gets swept up in it somehow, like sort of an ironic way, because his brother plays an ex-con. So I thought maybe there'd be something you have to deal with. Oh, I have to deal with my brother accidentally being involved or something. He just has no reason to be in the movie at all. It's not well constructed. It's not particularly well shot. The action sequences aren't particularly exciting. As an exploitation action movie, this is not one of the better Death Wish films, and that is not a compliment.
There's really awful Death Wish films.
I've never seen the fifth one. I've heard that one is just unbelievable shit. I've never seen Death Wish 5.
It's cheap and terrible. Death Wish 4 is notable, the crackdown, because it's about a crack epidemic.
I get it.
Clever play on words there. Death Wish 4 has one of the most spectacular on-screen kills I think I've ever seen. Okay. And you can find it on YouTube. Okay. Watch that clip. You've seen everything you need to about Death Wish 4. You need to sit down and study carefully every frame of Death Wish 3, because that's just the crazy one.
Yeah.
It's one where Paul Kersey moves out of town and becomes essentially a tank. He turns into a tank, he orders machine guns, and just starts gunning down gangsters in the street for no good reason. It's pretty spectacularly, awfully spectacular.
So yeah, if you want to take this piece of serious art, doesn't work. You want to take this piece of entertainment, doesn't work. That's my same comment with Red Sparrow, but I will say that of the two, Death Wish was at least a little more entertaining because Eli Roth is insane. So there you go. I don't.
What do you give it on our scale of C- to C+?
Wish, I give a C-. It's a really just tone deaf, just bad, ugly joke of a movie, and I don't think it works. Red Sparrow, I think, is, although it technically more accomplished, I actually think in the end, because not only is it kind of ugly, not only does it like not understand its own tone and point very well, I think it's also really long and kind of dull. So I actually think it's slightly worse than Death Wish in that regard, but it's still, either one is the same.
I think its dullness is maybe its worst crime. I think it actually tried to be very responsible, even though visually you clearly didn't read it. But I'm going to give it a C just because I feel there's some competence in there. Okay. But there's not enough for me to really just say, everybody needs to go see Red Sparrow. No, you don't need to see Red Sparrow.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Does anyone need to see The Love Guru?
No, and I wish there were ways to unsee things. The Love Guru is a terrible-ass movie.
I had never seen The Love Guru. The Love Guru is a film that came out in 2008, about 10 years ago. It won and all of our options on the Schmoedown poll for the movie, the Notorious movie we would review this week, were winners of the Razzie Award for Worst Picture. Which, and honestly, like if you look at the list of Razzie Awards, they run from that's a legitimately terrible movie to that's not that bad.
Yeah,
None of them, I would argue, are super good, but I think some of them are maybe misunderstood.
A lot of them are definitely low-hanging fruit. You know, whatever year they were nominated, they were just sort of either critically reviled or there was a popular opinion about how bad they were. That's what got them the nomination.
They were the year's most obvious punchline. Yeah. That's how the Razzies function. But to be fair, none of them are particularly good movies. I would say, like, of like the winners of Best Picture or Worst Picture, I think Mommy Dearest gets a bit of a bum rap. I think there's a cant value to it, but I don't think it's terrible. And I actually, one of the options on there, I Know Who Killed Me, starring Lindsay Lohan, I actually think is an interesting movie. Maybe it's not a particularly good movie, but I think it's an interesting thriller.
There's a lot to dig through, and I Know Who Killed Me. That's for sure.
I think it's neat, and I kind of wish people had voted for that because I would have enjoyed sitting through it again and kind of dissecting what works and what doesn't work about
this weird color-coded virgin whore hysterics polemic. Yeah, it's pretty terrific.
Which is rather pointed about the way we were treating Lindsay Lohan as a celebrity at the time. We didn't pick that. You picked The Love Guru, a film that effectively kind of killed Mike Myers' career when he wasn't voicing Shrek. Like he had,
more or less.
He had created this character. It's my understanding the character was originally supposed to appear in like one of the Austin Powers movies, and they ended up not using it. And he got his own movie called The Love Guru. It is about a guy not unlike Deepak Chopra.
In fact, he aspires to be Deepak Chopra.
And indeed trained with Deepak Chopra under Ben Kingsley, a.k.a. Ben Needed the Paycheck Kingsley.
Look, it's kind of sad to say that this is not the most embarrassing thing Ben Kingsley has done.
It's up there.
It's up because he did Thunderbirds. He did Blood Rain.
Blood Rain is the nadir of Ben Kingsley's career because Blood Rain barely required him to like get out of his chair, and even then he couldn't be bothered to emote. Like we ask nothing of you, Ben.
Here he plays a character, Sir Ben Kingsley, Sir Ben Kingsley, the knighted Sir Ben Kingsley,
Oscar-winning actor Ben Kingsley, star of my two favorite movies, Ben Kingsley, Sneakers and Searching for Bobby Fischer.
He plays a character named Guru Tuggan Mapuda.
Get it?
Who is eternally cross-eyed and gets a bunch of laugh lines. I call them laugh lines from an objective perspective.
Because they're supposed to be funny.
Not because they give you laughs, but that is the function they serve in the script.
They initially introduce him as this guru who's going to train a young Deepak Chopra and a young... the Love Guru, whose actually name I don't even remember.
Guru Pitka.
Guru Pitka, played by Mike Myers. Played by Mike Myers as a child, as a kid with a giant Mike Myers CGI head put on him. That the scale is so far off, it's really hard to look at. And
I'm wondering that they had to have just made that a joke, just how ridiculous it was, because they couldn't have made it look good.
No, I hope that was the case, but it's uncomfortable to look at, though.
Putting somebody else's face on somebody else's body, like, I think maybe Captain America kind of pulled it off. Like in some of those early scenes, it was like I felt like his head was a little bobbly because it clearly doesn't match the skinny body they were putting it on.
I think they got away with it in that one. I think it's probably the best version of it.
The third or the fourth, the one where Bella was pregnant in the Twilight
that's horrifying.
Films. Yeah, where they
Breaking Dawn was the baby, right?
Breaking Dawn Part 1, where
when she's gaunt.
They used effects to make her look really kind of gaunt and skinny, and that was actually a pretty scary good effect.
But then you got to look at what they did with like the baby's face in Breaking Dawn
Part 2. No.
Never do that with the baby. Between Breaking Dawn Part 2 and Junior, where they early CGI'd Arnold Schwarzenegger's face on a baby.
Well, it was a photographic effect. It wasn't even CGI. But it's terrifying either way.
Ben Kingsley, he's introduced with one of the many jokes that made me literally pause the movie so I could just take stock of how everything was doing, because he asks Mike Myers, Mike Myers says his parents are dead, that's why he's looking to be trained as a guru.
He's an American who was raised in India under this guru.
And he said, your parents are dead, what tell me about them. It's like, well... they were here as Christian missionaries, but before that they were dog stylists. So you're saying they were into doggy style before the missionary position. And I just had to pause the movie.
And the young Deepak Chopra snickers, and they cut back to creepy CGI head Mike Myers, and he's like, yeah, my parents are dead, thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
Really
and
sad.
then the next time we see Ben Kingsley, it's this weird, like, guru fight training where they're gonna, like, do kung fu with mops, but the mops have been dipped in Ben Kingsley's urine. Mm-hmm. These are the jokes.
Well, here's the thing about Lilla, and it's from the plot is he's a famous guru. He's the second most famous guru. He wants to be first most famous. Yeah. His big gig is he has to arrange one of the Toronto Maple Leafs, a hockey player played by Romany Malco, back with his wife, who he recently left behind. Mm-hmm. And she is
played by Megan Good.
And she is now shacked up with another Canadian,
Jacques
Grandet, who plays for the LA Kings. Mm-hmm. So the American actor plays for the Canadian team, and the American actor plays for the Canadian team.
Justin Timberlake plays Jacques Grandet as this over-the-top Canadian archetype, but his big joke is he has a very large penis.
Yeah,
that's the joke.
They call him Lecoq. He has roosters all over his house and all over his car. He's defined by his big wiener.
Yeah.
And
his Canadianness. He really freaks out when Celine Dion shows up.
Yeah, and
Celine Dion is one of two celebrity cameos they get without actually getting the celebrity.
The other one is Oprah. Yeah,
he just clearly use like a little bit of stock footage and then just
they dub in somebody else's voice.
Yeah. God, it's terrible.
But yeah, he's this really big, over the top character who has published many books, and he uses a lot of cute little acronyms to that spell out things like BLOWME, which he says spells Blaum. He thinks that's really funny. I appreciated the Canadian jokes because Mike Myers is Canadian, and all the hockey jokes, like he's
allowed.
So that's why it's like, I'm going to give you a Canadian pizza. What's that? It's a Pop-Tart with ketchup on it.
That can't be a thing.
I'm sure it is.
That's really gross.
To our Canadian listeners, is that a thing?
Tell us if that's a thing. That's weird. I've been to Canada. I've never heard of that.
Poutine comes from Canada, and that's really
Poutine is great.
Popular, is it?
I like poutine. It's a fast food, but it's good. Okay. Like it tastes good. You can't imagine a Pop-Tart with ketchup being delicious.
They hold donuts in very high esteem in Canada, which is great because they're a logical, sane people, and donuts are wonderful. However, they go to Tim Hortons, which is like the donuts at Tim Hortons are unbelievably bad.
Well, but here's the thing. Tim Hortons is ubiquitous. You can't go a couple of blocks without running into a Tim Hortons at a major city in Canada. No. Or at the very least, all the cities I've been to, they're like more ubiquitous than Starbucks. Yeah, and that's really ubiquitous.
It's like Canadian Subway, but it's donuts and coffee. And evidently, I work with a Canadian. I have a Canadian coworker. She says that the coffee at Tim Hortons is what you're supposed to get. Just get the coffee. Don't get the donuts. She's Canadian, and she doesn't.
The donuts are adequate donuts. The coffee is good.
The coffee is good. I went to Canada. I gotta go to Tim Hortons. I've heard all about these legendary donuts. I'm a big donut aficionado. Yeah. I have to have a donut.
It's the coffee.
Yeah, the donut, it was dry and didn't have a lot of flavor. It's like, I'll just go back to Stan's in Westwood over by UCLA.
Well, we're lucky.
They've got blueberry crisp.
We're in LA. We have a lot of
fashions with
We're in LA. There's a fair number of gourmet or at the very least crazy high quality.
Okay, fine. I'll go to Winchell's then. The Winchell's donuts are much better.
I digress. Anyway, he's got to help this hockey player get back with his girlfriend because ever since she left him for this rival player, he's been playing like crap, and they're in the playoffs, but they cannot. They can't win because this guy sucks because his mind isn't on track. So Jessica Alba, who owns the team, she invites Guru Pitka, and I kind of appreciate how quickly the plot gets going here, because under almost any other movie, there would be like, okay, we have this montage of this guy not doing good at hockey, we've established this, we have a meeting where Jessica Alba finds out we need to get this guy back on track.
There'd be a whole investigation sequence as to why he's playing badly.
She'd have like some sort of coincidence that gets her like sort of aware of Guru Pitka's existence. And she'd have to like have a meeting with him. This is literally just, we do one quick intro scene with Guru Pitka, which is actually one of the film's funnier jokes, where Morgan Freeman is like doing the voiceover narration, and then it cuts to Mike Myers like recording the narration with like a Morgan Freeman filter, and it's actually kind of funny. It's a harmless, cute joke. And then we cut to like a big hockey thing, and then Jessica Alba just says, he's not good at hockey anymore. I've hired a guru. I'm like, whoa, okay.
That's great.
Just jump in. We don't need any of that stuff. Who cares?
It's a comedy. Trim it all out.
Get to the good stuff. And then we cut to And this is the first of many where I'm just like, I don't understand why this is in the movie. A musical number of Guru Pitka on a sitar playing 9 to 5, the theme song from the classic, one of the great...
It's the title sequence.
It is I don't care. It's a title sequence. What does that have to do with the movie? It's not about working 9 to 5. It's about matchmaking. It has nothing to do with the movie.
It's a cinema commentary. This is how you open a film, with a song from another opening song from another famous film, but we do it Indian style.
There are songs from other movies that would make sense.
I'm not arguing that it's a good joke.
Okay,
but I do see the joke.
It's just I don't understand. 9 to 5 is a great song, and honestly, like, I'm fine. Like, you want to do 9 to 5 on a sitar? I'm like, cool, that could be fun. But like, it doesn't fit the film. Like, when you do,
it's a high energy comedy film. That's the tone they're going for. Totally, I think it's fine. It's fine.
Here's the thing. The reason
that's the only thing that's fine about this stupid ass movie.
We're gonna keep talking about everything that's wrong with the Love Guru, and it's a lot. But I think the most obvious comparison is to look at Mike Myers' other big Mike Myers-centric comedy franchise. Because the Wayne's World movies are actually pretty mild compared to this.
Yeah.
And Shrek is kind of its own kind of weird thing, and Michael Myers isn't really the whole selling point. But the Austin Powers movie, Michael Myers played half the roles. It was all kind of his particular brand of humor, and at least the first one's pretty good.
First one's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the second one is just the same as the first movie, but the jokes are grosser, and I don't think it's that great. I think the third one has some good bits. But the thing that those movies had was they had the structure of a spy movie kind of grandfathered in. So, like, there's a thing moving it forward, there's a thing we can always latch onto, and there's always another trope that we can play with that can be a funny aside. Like the joke about how Will Ferrell plays a hench person who gets killed or thrown off, but he just refuses to die. That's a joke. You can do that. Or the pull bit with the sharks with laser beams on their head. There's a joke there. I get it. It's funny. With The Love Guru, it's just kind of a lousy setup for a rom-com with this character in it. The character isn't very funny, and the rom-com stuff isn't very good, so there's nothing to work with here. There's not a lot of comedic real estate.
Yeah, there's two things going on in The Love Guru, and one is the way, not just Mike Myers, but the way a lot of TV comedians, especially those that got work on Saturday Night Live, tend to create comedy. They all came out of like Second City schools of comedy. And one of the guiding ethoses of the Second City School of Comedy is that you have to create one indelible character. And then, presumably, once you have a funny, weird character, you can put it in any situation that would be funny.
Yeah, like...
Ernest P. Worrell, Pee Wee Herman, Elvira came out of the Second City.
John Belushi's The Samurai.
The Samurai.
The Samurai is this great... I mean, say what you will about it, but the whole point of John Belushi as a samurai was the second you saw the sketch, like a guy walks into a deli and the samurai is in the deli, that's the joke.
Yeah, there's a samurai instead of a usual person.
There you go. You got a whole sketch.
There was no pressure to come up with a good scenario for that character. It was just the character. So Mike Myers came up with Austin Powers, this really cheeky, exaggerated version of James Bond, who is just sort of a goofball. But the film was smart enough to put him in the modern day. What would happen if this dated form of thinking was updated in 1997? And so, that's where all the comedy comes from, is this clash.
So, like, you do the actual spy stuff, and that's fun because it's spy stuff, but anytime he's out of that element, it's also funny because it's weird.
You look at the sequels, we're already past that, and there's no fish out of water humor anymore, and those are insufferable movies as a result.
For the most part, yeah.
They get pretty broad, and there's some good slapstick stuff, but... Yeah, you look at some other like Saturday Night Live inspired movies, The Ladies' Man, Superstar, where they're focusing on this one bizarre character. Wayne's World, it worked.
Yeah.
Because we can kind of relate to Wayne.
He's like a person.
Yeah.
Like, there you go. Or hell, even the Coneheads, they found this interesting, weird way to kind of make it about the immigrant experience and like finding out that your kids are more engaged in the culture in which you now live than you are. I'm not saying it's a great movie or anything like that, but it's a real movie.
It's better than The Love Guru. And
it's a pretty okay 90s comedy.
The concept behind The Love Guru is kind of what comes into the second thing that's going on in Love Guru, which is Guru Pitka is this exaggerated New Age guru. It's kind of satirizing a lot of New Age teachings.
Yeah, every time someone asks him for advice, he has a book he's already written about it, and it's in his pocket, and the title's kind of funny.
The titles and the jokes and the acronyms that he comes up with are all things that you said in junior high school. Like, there's a bit where he's about to meet a bunch of people. He says, "Are there any bears in the cave?" Meaning, are there boogers in his nose?
Get it?
I mean, that's something a 13-year-old would say, isn't it? There's the, here's my Uncle Jack. He's going to help me off this elephant. I'm glad my Uncle Jack is helping me off this elephant. Hey, you other character, would you help your Uncle Jack off an elephant?
Get it?
Get it? It's all these really immature jokes that are presented as this weird sort of antidote to the pseudo deep teachings a lot of New Age thinking, which are supposed to sound really mature and really adult and really deep and really spiritual.
We're kind of taking the piss.
He's replacing it with dick jokes, more or less, and it also presents that type of immaturity as a form of catharsis. And indeed, I suggested as one of our B features the Captain Underpants film,
which I thought was a little thin, but I see what you're getting
at. It's a little thin, but both films at their very center are about how potty humor is this big cathartic revelatory experience.
Yeah. There's
one of the central things that happens in The Love Guru is, let's just make dick jokes to each other and that will help you relax and actually make you a better person. And it's like, oh, look at my belt buckle. Ah, you're staring at my crotch. It's like,
and
what are you, 9? Oh yeah, you are. This movie is a 9-year-old.
Yeah, that's the interesting. The other thing I think it really needs to be addressed is that there's this like, one of the things that makes Mike Myers or has in the past made Mike Myers a very likable comedian was that he always seemed like he was really nice. Even like when he was making a terrible joke, there was always this air of apology to it. Or he was just like, sorry. I know this joke was dumb.
Look at the character, look at the camera and wince a little bit.
I know that we just did this whole long riff about like all these jokes about Scott Evil, and then just like we just sort of run out of steam and we just sort of apologize for the joke and we move on. There's something rather likable about this, something very pleasing about that. There's also a weird mean streak in this movie, particularly when it comes to Vern Troyer. Now I get that Mike Myers, I hope, I don't know anything about it, but the fact that he worked with Vern Troyer so many times probably means he has a pretty good relation with Vern Troyer. At least I hope that's the case, because Guru Pitka, who is supposed to be this incredibly like love everybody, loving, compassionate. As soon as Vern Troyer shows up, he's all about terrible jokes about height. Now, the first one he makes, I thought maybe they were going to do, because they did a lot of height jokes in Austin Powers. I don't think they were terribly funny there either, but whatever. The first one he makes, I thought maybe they were going to do it, but he was going to do it all by accident. Like, he's actually got a plate of shrimp. They're at a party. Yeah. He's like, shrimp? And Vern Troyer's like, hey! But then... and I was like...
You seem a little short-tempered, yeah.
Yeah, like, there's a couple where it was like, it's kind of an accident. But then after a while, he just flat out calls him, like, a really derogatory word for a little person or a dwarf. The correct term for someone who is of that particular stature is debatable. I've heard people say different things are right. I never want to say the wrong thing. But
I've heard little person is okay and dwarf is okay.
Yeah.
If I am incorrect, please correct me, because I do want to say they're correct.
We want to be right here. It's just, sometimes it's hard to know for certain, and some people have different preferences. But regardless, there's a lot of jokes about Vern Troyer's height. On the other hand, he gets to play like the manager of the hockey team. He gets to play like a real character. Like there's actually like one of the funniest jokes in the movie, and there's like 5 good ones, by the way.
There's a few that might make you chuckle.
There's a good one where Vern Troyer, they're all in Vern Troyer's office, and he's chewing him out for ruining the game. And Vern Troyer's office is built to scale for him.
It's like a little office.
Yeah, so everyone's like sitting down to them, but it's kind of like the office from Being John Malkovich, and it's actually like, I like that they built that office for him.
Yeah.
They clearly like him. They want to keep him. He's a good manager. Like, I actually like, not only is it kind of an amusing image, but like, if you think about the joke for a second, it actually kind of helps the narrative a bit. It's a well thought out piece of humor. And apparently Vern Troyer actually kept a lot of that set.
Oh, that's funny.
Which I think is really cool. So like, that at least works. But the other thing about it is there's a fair number of jokes at the expense of India.
Yeah.
Not as many as like you might think, but like there's a recurring gag where when they like, someone, probably my mom calling me, I'll bet you anything. It is my mom. I will call her back.
Okay.
I'm a monster. In any case, when they greet each other, they bow and everyone says Mariska Hargitay.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah. Mariska Hargitay is an actor, perhaps best known for her work on Tequila and Bonetti, a short-lived television series about a cop and his talking dog. Or, if you're not us, and you don't host a podcast about TV shows that failed after one season or less, you know her from Law & Order Special Victims Unit, of which she was on forever. She might still be on, I have no idea.
Going on 20 years, I believe, she's been on that show.
And she's great. I actually really like her as an actor. I think she's fantastic. But that's the joke, is like they're saying Mariska Hargitay instead of saying actual words. That joke only works if you think the Indian language is inherently funny and not real. And it's kind of fucked up. What I will say is, at the very least, there's this weird scene where he's at a big Hollywood party, and he leans into Jessica Simpson and says Mariska Hargitay, and Jessica Simpson says Mariska Hargitay to you too. They have a nice little banter. Same thing to Val Kilmer, who shows up as himself. Weird. And then he says Mariska Hargitay to Mariska Hargitay, who then says, I love your work. I particularly liked that book you wrote about not being a victim. Thank you. You have been doing wonderful work in that as well, which is why we've built the Guru Pitka and Mariska Hargitay Special Victims Unit. And then there's a button that plays the Law & Order Chung Chung. I had to pause that as well, because not only is that the worst joke ever, it's also a joke I feel like I would have written. It's actually... it's an elaborate pun. They worked their butt off to get that pun.
Mariska Hargitay is so game in that scene. Like, she actually, like, cheers. Yay, that's so great. Like, her enthusiasm saves the joke.
Yeah.
Had they done that once, where they just sort of bow to each other and say Mariska Hargitay... That would have been funny.
Maybe because they say it under your breath.
They start saying it a lot, and that makes it less funny. And then when they call attention to the gag, it's like, oh, it's just comedy death. Then,
yeah.
So yeah, there's no joke too low that they won't make. It's all about pissing and farting. There's a scene where Vern Troyer is asked, he's ranting because he's really angry. He plays this really angry character. They say, "Are you finished?" He says, "No," and then he farts and he blows snot into a spittoon, and then he says, "No, I'm finished."
It's funny when you talk about it. There's a certain kind of bad movie, and it's really frustrating. There's a certain kind of bad, because we all know there are different levels of bad movies. There's bad, but it kind of works for what it is and okay. Then there's bad, but it's so bad it's actually rather entertaining because it's so bizarre. And then there's really like hard to watch bad. And the problem with that level of bad is it can be hard to describe those movies without making them seem like something you gotta see. I seriously, I got like maybe 5 or 6 good hearty chuckles out of The Love Guru. And the movie's short. The movie's a little under 90 minutes. But in a 90-minute broad comedy with multiple jokes every minute, 6 is a shitty average. 6 is a bad number of jokes to get away
especially with like something that's toned like the slapstick comedy the way this is. One of the film's saving graces is Stephen Colbert. He plays one of the hockey announcers who at the beginning announces that he's finally off drugs and I'm sorry for the crime sprees I went on. And his behavior gets increasingly bizarre as the film goes on.
There's a great
cut back to him.
There's a grand comedic tradition, and we talked about it when we reviewed the Air Bud movies, of the comedy sports announcers. Because if you have a comedy about sports, in order to sort of keep the game clear, keep the narrative of the actual play clear, because you're going to have to edit around it, you can't show a whole ball game. You want to have some announcers in there just to call it, remind everyone of the stakes. Oh, now so-and-so is at the plate. He's the heaviest hitter in the game. Thank you, guy from Major League 2. Like, that kind of shit.
Well, Major League, that was Bob Uecker. That was actually an announcer.
The one I was actually trying to think of was was it Little Big League? Rookie of the Year. Rookie of the Year, because I don't know anything about sports. At the end of Rookie of the Year, because the whole thing of Rookie of the Year is there's this kid, and he gets his arm injury, and there's this freak thing where
when it heals, he can throw extra hard.
Yeah, like his tendons grow back like super weird, and he's got like this like 200-mile-an-hour fastball, and it's insane. And so he's actually picked up for the big leagues, and he's this teenager who's now a big league baseball player. It's a cute little premise for a movie. I haven't seen it since I was 17.
Around like 95.
I remember liking it fine, but whatever. But the thing I always remembered about it was at the end, there was this thing where it was just like, oh, now he's going to have to pitch against this guy. And I'm like, and he's like a great baseball player. I'm like, I don't know who that is. I'm going to have to take your word on that. Like, you did not really do the work on that, like on one of those. Like, it's just sort of... Anyway, I digress. Where was I going with this? Anyway, where was I even talking about? It's so fucking...
premise of comedy.
Premise of comedy. fucking sports. The comedy announcer though.
Oh, okay.
Because like there's this thing where you get like comedians to do that comedy announcer bit, and they just get wackier and wackier and wackier, and you start seeing him lose their goddamn mind, like the Little League announcer in Air Bud's Seventh Inning Fetch, where it's just like
wasn't it Tim Conway and Dick Martin, or was Dick Martin in that one?
They were in like the second one, I think. Okay. But like after a while, you get this guy who is like announcing Little League.
To whom? Yeah.
Who is listening? Why is this on the radio? What I know it's a small town, but Jesus! Like,
wait a minute, your mic isn't plugged in.
Yeah, like that's the attitude you get.
I'm on the radio in my mind.
My personal favorites are basketball. Basketball is really funny announcers. Like I actually quite like basketball.
Basketball is a pretty funny.
I think it's a dumb movie, but it's a funny movie, and the jokes land. In Love Guru, they mostly don't, but you're right. Steve Colbert is really funny in it. Funnily enough, John Oliver is in this too, and he plays Guru Pitka's agent. He has no jokes to speak of. The closest thing he has to a joke is it turns out his name is Dick Pants. I'll let that sink in. Right. Take a moment.
Dick Pants.
Dick Pants.
Look, we don't need to talk about the Love Guru anymore.
Are we done?
I think we've done. When we get to Dick Pants, I think we can put a period on the sentence and move on.
It's not funny. Like, the jokes don't land. They don't have the structure they need to land. The characters are all pretty weak. It just doesn't work as a movie.
Guru Pitka is not appealing. He's incompetent. He's mean-spirited. He's just this weird sort of cartoon that... that's something you do like around your friends when you're drunk and you kind of giggle a bit and then you leave it there. You don't put that in a movie.
You probably could have. Here's the Guru Pitka might have worked as a Saturday Night Live sketch where like the celebrity of the week comes in and has their problem solved by Guru Pitka. That could have worked.
Guru Pitka would have been a great character if he was a really good guru. If he was like this really weird, weird bonkers guy, but the advice he gave was actually very sage. But nothing he says works, and he doesn't seem to know what he's doing, and he's also really selfish, and he wants money more than anything, which is kind of where the satire of New Age teaching comes in.
And at least that's a plot point. I'll give him that. I think one of the interesting things when I think about like the characters who just kind of came out of nowhere and worked. And honestly, I'm going to say this right now. I think the sequel sucked, and I think the first one has a lot of problems, especially if you look back on it now. But you got to look at the success of the first Ace Ventura movie. Got to remember when Ace Ventura came out, Jim Carrey, he'd been in a few movies, but it was always like kind of like not quite his strengths. Like he was in Once Bitten and no one cared. And but like
his really bizarre stand-up comedy hadn't come into play yet.
Yeah, he was in
feature film
in Living Color. He started to really break out with a bunch of really memorable characters. And then one year, I think it was the same year, Ace Ventura and The Mask came out. And The Mask is pretty great, and he played like a living cartoon character and was perfect for him. And in Ace Ventura, and I heard
Ace Ventura was first, then The Mask, and Dumb and they were all the same year. So that was
a hell of a year.
That was a good year for him.
That was a great year. With the thing with Ace Ventura, and I heard this was Jim Carrey's idea, but I'm not 100% sure about that, so don't quote me on that. Originally, the idea of Ace Ventura Pet Detective was he's a pet detective and he's a bumbling pet detective who can't do anything right. And someone had the brilliant idea, what if he's spectacularly good at it?
Which he is.
And that's the thing that makes that movie work better than it should, if you really think about it. Because it's a silly idea, there's a lot of dumb jokes in it, but the fact that he's competent gives the character an inherent dignity that actually allows his jokes to land.
And it lets the characters around him get away with a lot of his bizarre behavior.
Why is he here? Why do you put with him? He's actually really talented.
It's like, why is this weirdo here? Well, watch him work.
He gets the job done. That's it. That's the only reason he keeps someone like that around is because they do their job. Guru Pitka doesn't do it. I mean, we hear about it a little bit. We never really see it. And it was really funny, actually, and the last thing I'll say about Love Guru, and we'll move on. It's really funny to look at, like, the montage of celebrities he supposedly helped and to see, like, this was 10 years ago. So it's like, oh, look, he got Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise together. Oops.
Uh-oh.
And then, like, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and like, oops.
Oh, dear. Like, bad examples now.
There's a lot of bad examples. I mean, that's just the nature of show business. It's a tragedy how few relationships seem to work. But, like, it really, in retrospect, like, makes him look like that much worse. It makes it look... It changes the joke. The joke is like, oh, look, he's a good love guru. But in actuality, it's like, no, he's terrible at this.
He's terrible, yeah.
Yeah.
So when it came to pairing this with something, we had a lot of options.
I suggested, and I still think it would have been good, if you look at Love Guru not as a matchmaking comedy, but as a hockey movie about like a hockey team doing whatever it takes in order to succeed. Slapshot. It's one of the great sports movies. I love Slapshot.
I only saw Slapshot for the first time kind of recently.
It's so good, isn't it?
It's really good.
So that's a good one, and I highly recommend you see Slapshot. You mentioned Captain Underpants, which is a movie I love. I just think the connection's really fucking thin.
I don't know. I think at the center of both, like the catharsis of potty humor is like the theme of both of these movies. But that's his maybe.
The other one I kind of pushed for because it's a really great ice skating movie and a fun romance. It's not a classic, but it's really good. Is The Cutting Edge, which people do not talk about enough. It's just this rock solid story about a hockey player who ends up like his career gets messed up, but he ends up training to be a figure skater instead. It's actually a really good movie. It's not a brilliant thing, but it's really quite good, and I liked it a lot.
It's no Ice Castles.
What is?
What is?
Even the remake of Ice Castles is an Ice Castles. Wasn't the remake of Ice Castles from the same director as Ice Castles?
I think it was.
Weird.
I think they remade their own material.
Yeah, that happens more often than you'd think.
But I suggested something a little off the wall.
Yes.
That is also, in many ways, a satire of commercialized spirituality. The new wave that started to infiltrate not just America, but many areas of the world. How a lot of Eastern mysticism, but in a lot of ways a watered down version of Eastern mysticism, started to infiltrate the sort of self-help section of bookstores. And a lot of it was like legit Eastern mysticism, and a lot of it was like based on ancient religious beliefs, but it was really, really heavily commodified, and it lost a lot of its credibility through how cheaply it was marketed and remarketed and repackaged. You know, the way shysters would sell crystals to people. It became meaningless after very quickly. Alejandro Jodorowsky.
One of the great poets of cinema.
Yeah, one of the great cinematic poets. Shortly after he began taking acid. So, I'm not kidding.
I know.
Started to look at this sort of commodification of spirituality, something he believed deeply in, and decided to make his own satire. It was called The Holy Mountain, and it is one of the greatest films. Alejandro Jodorowsky is a filmmaker who I deeply admire. I've never seen a bad film, although I've never seen his Tusk, which I've heard is not good. Tusk is not good.
Okay, fair enough. But I haven't seen that, so I've never seen a bad Jodorowsky film. I've interviewed Alejandro Jodorowsky. He is bastard. Everything you would ever want him to be. He's like an artist with a capital art. And he's fantastic.
You interviewed him as like 81, I think, when you interviewed him.
He hadn't done a video interview in years. I was so lucky I was able to finagle it, but he was an amazing interview. And we talked about his film, The Dance of Reality, which is one of the best movies of the decade.
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
Brilliant. But
you haven't seen Endless Poetry.
I still haven't seen Endless Poetry. And to be honest, I had not seen The Holy Mountain until you told me to. I knew I had to. But sometimes...
Had you seen El Topo?
I've definitely seen El Topo. El Topo is the shit. El Topo is fantastic. But as film critics, we try to see everything, but it's kind of nice to have a couple of classics you haven't seen because you can get to them eventually. You haven't burned through them all.
Yeah.
So I knew I was going to see The Holy Mountain eventually. You pushed for this, and I was like, based on what I know, it seems like it could work, so let's just run with it. You loaned me Holy Mountain.
I own it. I own the Jodorowsky box set.
Of course you do. And I watched Holy Mountain, and I got to tell you, I have no idea. It's obviously brilliant, but the thing is that the thing with Holy Mountain is that it's
a work of surrealism.
It's a work of surrealism, and in a very different way than The Love Guru, it's a work of absurdity as well.
Yeah.
But it is a work that I honestly feel requires a lot of sort of appendices in order to appreciate everything he's laying down, because Jodorowsky isn't just doing a story about finding yourself in this sort of generalized Western way. He is laying the smackdown on the tarot and astrology. There's so much inside humor and references and allusions to things that I am only passingly familiar with a lot of the time, that I know there's more to it than even I'm picking up, but even what I picked up is transcendent, and that's impressive.
Yeah. So the Holy Mountain, to give you a vague idea as to what's going on, is about essentially Jesus Christ. It's this very Jesus-looking figure who is wandering through these really bizarre modern streets where they like put on stage wars with lizards and toads out in public squares, and there's people yelling gibberish, and he picks up a retinue of disciples, but they're all like Bikini Babe disciples.
There's this weird thing where he passes out, and he's got a passing... He looks like Jesus Christ. So someone picks him up, and they take him to a factory where they make a plastic mold of him.
In a crucified position, yeah.
So that he can be the model for Jesus Christ on all of their life-size crucifixes.
So that's a good commentary on religion right there. And the commodification thereof.
And people start following him around as if he is a sort of Christ figure. It's not unlike Life of Brian in that regard. Another brilliant movie. Another brilliant movie with a weird Beatles sort of connection, because Life of Brian exists because George Harrison was a fan of Monty Python, and Monty Python was having trouble getting a movie made, so he funded it. John Lennon and Yoko Ono were huge fans of El Topo, and they're personally responsible for getting The Holy Mountain made. And seriously, from what I know about late-era John Lennon, and especially Yoko Ono, all of it makes sense. All of this is so them.
Those weird Eastern mysticism.
So cool.
So this Christ figure goes up into a tall tower, which has been like giving pittances out to the people,
like the severed head in Zardoz that shoots guns.
Yeah, it lowers a basket, and he gets like on a big hook, and he rides up back inside this big weird phallic tower.
Quick aside, if you've never seen Zardoz, I don't mean that the giant head fires guns at people. I mean it lobs actual guns at people.
It barfs rifles out of its mouth to the savages below.
I suspect we're going to get to Zardoz someday on this podcast, and I cannot wait.
Zardoz is a flaming pile.
And I love every minute of it.
It's not just a moldy sponge, it's the mushrooms are multicolored.
So he goes up into this tower, and in this tower...
Jodorowsky's at the top.
Yeah, Jodorowsky himself, the filmmaker, he plays the alchemist, who, for a long portion of the film, he's kind of just spiritually preparing this guy, grooming him, purifying him in a weird sequence that involves steamed poo that I didn't understand at all.
They turn his feces into gold.
It's really weird. I'm sure that's a big commentary about the importance of gold. And what ends up happening is they said, we're going to sort of teach you what it means to have a human soul. Here are the ingredients of a human soul. And then we have a long sequence where people representing different aspects of astrology, we reveal their lives and who they represent, what planet they represent, and how they interact with the Earth. So, like,
each one is like a different facet of the human character, like represents a different facet of the human character. Mars, for instance, is all about war, and so they make weapons, but the weapons all look like menorahs and crucifixes,
which is a great montage sequence where you can find that online. It's just like boy, does that feel pointed. It's really great.
Venus is all about love and sex, and I think it's Venus is the one that has the giant sex robot where they probe, and it looks like a performance art piece.
They're trying to artificially create the human orgasm.
Yeah, so there's this big square boxy thing with a big robotic vagina in it, and they probe it with this big glowing rod, and it's just really strange.
One of them, I'm trying to remember which one it is an architect who believes that you can make more money out of architecture if people don't think they need basic amenities like heat and running water. So he's trying to sell this new experience of you don't need a home, you just need shelter for the night. So he's selling coffins.
And which you get in, and then at a certain time of the day they all lay flat and you sleep there at night.
That's it. That's the whole shebang.
The little comment on modernity there. This film's got everything, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's absolutely nuts. And
anyway, once all of these people are they give their backgrounds, they're all prepared by the alchemist, and they're all taken to essentially Sodom. They go on this big spiritual quest, and they try to be tricked. Like as they go into Sodom, they're trying to get sold new aspects and new answers to their spiritual problems.
Well, the way that this journey is framed, though, I think is actually pretty amazing. Is they talk about how they're going to go to the Holy Mountain, and a Holy Mountain is a concept that is prevalent in a lot of different religions. It's this sort of connective tissue between mortality, Earth, humanity, and spiritualism. And if they have any connection,
big part of Islam,
and the idea is that if they have any connection at all, they have to touch somewhere, and that's the Holy Mountain. It just goes into the sky, and at the top of the mountain, you would achieve some form of enlightenment. But the idea is that there are people at the top of the Holy Mountain who have transcended existence and will live forever. And all of these people that we were introduced to in the Holy Mountain, all of these strange people who are like deciding like, oh, in order to make more money, we just have to kill hundreds of millions of people. That's the plan. Like, that's their idea of spirituality. They're going to get together and perform a spirituality heist.
Yeah.
Where they're going to climb the Holy Mountain and steal immortality from the gods.
And usurp the throne.
Is that a hell of a plot. That's a hell of a plot. That is a plot that sounds cool, but then you realize, how do I frame that? How do I make that visually a thing? And Jodorowsky
does it.
He does it through
flying colors,
surreal imagery, through smart illusion, through just constantly.
It's a big cultural cross section of everything that religion and spirituality has offered so far, which is maybe one of the most ambitious things one can do with cinema.
Because here's the thing: what I like about this movie, one of the many things I like about this movie is, on one level, Jodorowsky is saying spirituality, religion, and organized religion often give you very little and can be exposed for enormous hypocrisy. However, spiritual enlightenment is possible.
Yeah.
And it is possible from a variety of levels. I liked that as they ascend the mountain, they send someone back. Someone actually just finds mortal love, and it's like, you're cool.
Yeah.
This is it. You're good. This is what you need right now. This is better for you. That's actually really great.
Well, and yeah, that there's all of these options, and as they go along, they've realized that these are temptations, but they're also options for and unique. And you can go over and follow this path, and you can follow this path, and there's all these other. And they're saying, no, eye on the prize. We have to usurp all spirituality, which is the central satire that ties it into the Love Guru.
Yeah.
They want to take over spirituality. They want to be the center of your spiritual heart, essentially, in this case, of the world.
The concept of worldliness, of selflessness, to them, inherently selfish.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what the Love Guru is.
It
on
really
a much shallower level, but yeah.
And it's a real damning indictment about it's you gotta ask yourself sometimes, what kind of person seeks out power? And that's something that every presidential candidate ever, you got to sort of look at them askance and just go, why are they actually doing this? Because there's a lot of bad reasons to do it. And, at some level, anyone who actually would run for president wants to be president. And you can say the same for anyone seeking religious power as well, or even capitalistic power. Why do they want this?
The function of most major religions is humility, is sort of prostrating yourself to the powers that you don't control and the things that made you.
The greatest wisdom is knowing that you know nothing.
Yeah, Socrates.
Yeah, Socrates. Hey, that's us.
Look, that's Socrates. It's under Socrates. Look it up. Oh, Bill and Ted. But we've strayed. Yeah, and when one...
Bill and Ted is also about enlightenment.
One who seeks to be an enlightened ruler has already shot themselves in the foot, because that's not humility.
Yeah, that's the irony.
And you look at a lot of Buddhism, and especially what Buddha said on the way to enlightenment, you do realize that he never sought to be powerful. In fact, the whole point was that it was his lack of ambition that gave him his enlightenment. In fact, that's what a lot of Buddhism is about. It's really about this sort of personal humility, making sure that you have no thought. Reaching this beautiful point where you don't have to think about everything all the time.
And it's not about asserting yourself. It's not about saying, I am here, look at me. And honestly, I think this is something people need to think about on a daily basis more. Look at social media. Someone can just put a stray thought into the world that people have to but my thought is, maybe we don't need it right now.
Well,
maybe it's all chill.
Even putting that on social media, it's like, this is an important enough thought that somebody else needs to see this. Not necessarily.
Is it? Yeah,
not every one of your tweets is a work of art.
I still argue it's not too late to call social media a fad. It's only been around for about 20 years. Really,
it can fade out.
It totally can. We can totally just say we kind of went overboard on that. We're going to scale it right. There's actually a new thing. I'm getting on the side, but I thought it was neat. There's a new thing they got out now called dumb phones. And a dumb phone is about the size of a credit card. It can make calls. It can text. It has an alarm. And I think they might be adding a thing that can call a cab, like an Uber. That's it. And that's all it can do.
And that's all you need.
That's all you need.
That's most of what you use your phone for. Everything else is extraneous.
The social media like that, you're just addicted to your phone. It's there when you need it, and when you don't need it's gone.
Yeah,
and I think that's neat.
They got too advanced.
I wonder if maybe we're starting to make that transition, and we're starting to like seek out like more like being present more and being a bit more. A
lot of spiritual leaders have said that there is like a big spiritual crisis in the modern world. How you can just look down and do your job and be okay, but it's driving a lot of people crazy, and it's driving on them to just become addicted in this sort of. A phrase I've heard before is "time is speeding up" out of kind of the new age.
The thing I think about is I think no matter whether you are a deeply religious person, and I know a lot of people are, and listen, I'm full disclosure, I'm an atheist. I'm not going to say that like anyone has to believe what I believe. This is what I got. This is what makes sense to me. But I think religion of any kind, even atheism, fulfills a certain spiritual need. We have a need to be more than ourselves and to feel like there's some order in the universe and to have some connection and have some philosophy in our lives. And we're all seeking out the best way to do that. And I think it's important to remember that can evolve and that it's supposed to. I mean, almost all religion is about evolving and becoming better over time and not just being one thing. It's to be part of a whole, to grow.
That a film like The Holy Mountain can fit almost all of that under one umbrella is pretty astonishing.
And to be incredibly entertaining.
And to be incredibly entertaining, to be really striking, to have a flaming tree that's made of dead rabbits. That's
a hell of an image. Yeah. I had to pause that too. I was like, wow.
Or, to have somebody get stabbed and have them bleed grapes. Just all kinds of really strange stuff going on in this movie.
Sequence.
And to give us the ending that it does.
Okay, we will not tell you how Holy Mountain ends. We will not tell you how Holy Mountain ends.
I'll just say that there's an epic spiritual pantsing that happens at the end of this movie.
That is both perfect and wholly unexpected and totally right. It all boils down to someone just saying, I promised you answers, and you will not be disappointed. And I was not disappointed. And how hard is that? It's a really, really good one. And afterwards, after the movie was over, I like ran into the room where my wife was working. It's like, I have to try doing the same thing and see if it works. It did not. But it's still fascinating. What a great way to end a movie. And it feels totally earned. It feels kind of wrong, and yet it is exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, and even just on a plain, like even if you can't, like you said, you didn't get a lot of this stuff because
there's a lot. I haven't read all of these texts.
I haven't studied the tarot. I'm not
I've done a little studying of the tarot, but it was like in college. I don't remember.
Yeah, I've studied. I haven't studied. Like I've read up on Buddhism and know a little tiny bit about Hinduism. But there's how many gods are there in Hinduism? Like
I don't know,
100,000. There's a lot of gods.
Don't know.
But yeah, even if you don't have any of that information, just going into this on a visceral level, you're going to be definitely moved and astonished by a lot of the shocking stuff that's in this, because Jodorowsky is one of those artists who actually accomplishes what he seeks to do. He wants to move you. He wants you to feel the infinity of the universe. He wants to shock you. He wants to bare his soul, and he wants to do it with a lot of color and energy, and he does it every time.
I think he's actually,
except for Tusk.
I think he's actually gone on record as saying he wants his movies to feel like you've done acid.
Yeah.
And with all the good and all the bad that comes with that.
Yeah, I really wish Dune had been made.
Jodorowsky's Dune.
I dig David Lynch's Dune plenty.
It's a strange movie, and I admire it, but like it's a weird flick.
It came out the same year as Return of the Jedi. You put those two films next to each other. Return of the Jedi like whimpers off into a corner. Don't look at me. What is it? You got these giant space worms that shoot lasers out their mouths?
Here's what I think is interesting. Alejandro Jodorowsky, again, one of the greatest art house filmmakers who ever lived. He almost made an adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune, which is this sprawling sci-fi epic that like sci-fi nerds have been drooling over for decades.
It's going to have Orson Welles and Salvador Dali was cast in it.
It was a strange idea to get someone who is that forthrightly art house. Just like no compromise whatsoever, complete rejection of the studio system to make a super expensive sci-fi movie. Now, here's what I think is fascinating. Jodorowsky didn't get to do that. Who did they get instead? David Lynch, who is in his own way just as fucking weird.
Striking. David Lynch was experimenting when he made Dune.
Yep.
And he said, well, what could I do within sort of this studio system? Like, what kind of blockbuster could I make? And he had to change a lot of his ideas. The studio recut his film for TV broadcasting, took his name off it. So there is an Alan Smithy version of Dune out there.
Which is a lot longer. And
longer and clearer. They actually explain a lot more.
A lot of people prefer that longer version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it incorporates a lot of what Frank Herbert had, in terms of like the Dune backstory. It takes place in the year AD 10,000, maybe not even AD, but 10,191. Who knows what calendar?
Yeah, maybe we switched it over at some point. Who knows?
I think in the sequel they make reference to like 20th century figures for the first time, so there is some connection to Earth. But each progressive novel takes place like millennia and then 10,000 years later on. Like we get to see distant echoes. It's such a bizarre thing.
Yeah,
and you would think that some like Jodorowsky could handle that sort of thing. David Lynch was a lot more intimate a filmmaker, so he did make an epic, but he was unhappy with it.
David Lynch is a bit more interested in like an individual's particular psychology. Jodorowsky's about big ideas.
Yeah,
and again, this is a guy who encapsulated kind of the entire religious experience that anyone could possibly go through in one movie,
and exposing its virtues and its sins all at once, and sometimes in the same sentence.
And just so we're clear, the connective tissue with the Love Guru is that it is possible to take the concept of enlightenment, this incredibly heady concept that, I'm going to say right now, most people will not achieve true enlightenment in their lifetimes. They'll try, but most people don't achieve nirvana. The Love Guru took this lofty concept and made something just puerile and dumb and just not funny.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate the gag, trying to take something as heady and as distant and as aloof as enlightenment and turn it into something that is just puerile junior high school boy humor.
Yeah.
There's a gag there.
Yeah, but there's a quick gag there. It's not a whole movie, I think. Jodorowsky did a movie that is more entertaining, funnier, and mind-blowing with kind of the same basic idea. Let's take the piss out of enlightenment and then let's achieve enlightenment together. And he did it. Wow.
That's something I appreciate about a lot of sort of enlightenment-centric thinking, that when you achieve enlightenment, there's this sort of noblesse that comes along with it. But if you are to achieve enlightenment, you have to understand that that noblesse is also is Maya. It is also illusion. So you can feel, I've achieved enlightenment, I am a higher being, but it's still okay to laugh at a fart joke. And it's folded into that, like it's intrinsic to that. So it's okay to acknowledge that there's also silliness to this.
Yeah.
You look at the classic Roman Catholic image of Christ on the cross. He's dead. He's miserable. This is the moment when his life was at its worst, when he's dying. You look at a statue of Buddha, and he's smiling. He's a laughing Buddha. That's the difference between a lot of like Western and Eastern spiritualism. We could go on and on and on.
We absolutely could. Okay, so here's what's going on. We are going to have, for next week's episode of Critically Acclaimed, your options are all going to be, because we haven't really done this yet, but there's a lot of bad ones. We haven't really done a disaster movie. Orca, kind of, but it's more of a when animals attack kind of movie.
Yeah.
We're looking at the big, dumb Irwin Allen kind of just everything goes kaputsky, and just people are in a mess, and it's usually melodramatic and crap. Now, your options are, you can go to the Schmoeville Facebook page, and we will give you the options of Earthquake, a movie about an earthquake, which was kind of the death of what was the biggest blockbuster genre of the 70s, because it was a very, very bad movie about an earthquake. If you've ever been to Universal Studios, they had that Earthquake Experience ride. That was the best thing that ever came out of this movie. It sucked. Moving on. Firestorm, starring Howie Long. Sports star Howie Long decided he was going to be a big action star, and I liked the premise of it. There's a whole heist that takes place, and guys are like trying to escape through a huge giant forest fire. Howie Long plays a fireman. Bob's your uncle. Action. Was it any good? I've heard it sucks, but let's find out if you vote for it. Another option: Roller Coaster, a movie about a roller coaster. Bad things happen on a roller coaster. How do you get a whole movie out of that? They did like that. There was a poster for that new television series 911 that looked like the entire plot of Roller Coaster probably takes place in the first 5 minutes. How are you going to get a whole movie about a faulty roller coaster? I can't wait to find that out, but only if you vote for it.
It turns out it's a haunted roller coaster.
Ooh. And then lastly, we got two fun ones. Mm-hmm. We have two Titanic movies that are not James Cameron's Titanic, and they're both animated movies.
Hooray!
So, first off, we've got The Legend of the Titanic, which is about the mice on the Titanic and how they tried to stop the Titanic from being destroyed by corrupt sharks.
And there's a rapping dog. Is that the one with the rapping dog? Or is that a different animated Titanic?
Titanic, The Legend Goes On is what you're thinking of. I think that's the one with the rapping dog.
Okay.
There's also the Titanic with a rapping dog. That one is Titanic, The Legend Goes On. And I'm confirming that right now. Okay. I want to make sure you know which one has the rapping dog and which one doesn't. Because that's kind of a big distinction. Rapping dog. Titanic Legend Goes On has the rapping dog.
Titanic The Legend Goes On has the rapping dog.
Yes.
Okay. Remember to watch every film that has a rapping dog.
Yeah.
Or if it has a cute animal on the poster and the animal's wearing sunglasses, hand me that gun.
Both of the Titanic animated movies are considered some of the worst movies ever made. I haven't seen either of them, so you can do that to us if you want.
Nor have I.
But you have to pick which one to rally behind, because they might be like the Oscars and like siphon off each other's votes, and then we have to do Firestorm or something.
That's why I wanted to do two. I wanted to see which one are you really passionate about.
Yeah.
Which one are the bad animated Titanic films?
You can pick those out. I'll make it very clear which one has the rapping dog and which one is basically about mice and has a weirdly happy ending. Like, it's super strange.
The Titanic is saved.
And which one is Firestorm, and there's Roller Coaster, and there's Earthquake. So those will be all your options. And we will review one of those next week, as chosen by you, and we'll pair it off with something that is
thematically appropriate.
Thematically appropriate and ideally better. So we will see how that plays off. Meanwhile, we have some letters we can read.
Let's read some letters.
You can write into Critically Acclaimed at criticallyacclaimedfans@gmail.com. Ask us questions. Give us debate topics. Do we have a correction to make? Do you just want to have your own voice heard? Do you have another review? We get a lot of letters. We can't read all of them because that would be its own podcast at this point. But we do what we can. So what do we got?
This one comes from Bone Steel. Hi, Bone Steel.
Nice.
Keeping it short and sweet, he says. Bibbs has talked a lot about the movie The Thin Man over the years.
Yes.
I finally caught up with the first two movies, and I really enjoyed them. My question is, if they were to reboot The Thin Man, which they're talking about constantly...
They've been talking about it for a while.
Who would you want to see cast as Nick and Nora? I was thinking Hugh Laurie would be an interesting Nick. Good casting. Although I'm at a loss at who would play Nora. Also, would you like the reboot to be a TV series or a film series? Personally, I would like to see a 6 to 10 episode TV series.
I would love to see, because I think you want to get the thing with. Okay, if you don't know The Thin Man, real fast. The Thin Man is based on a book by Dashiell Hammett, and it is a story about two alcoholic rich people who solve mysteries. And they're charming as fuck. And they have a cute little dog named Asta.
And they have a great relationship.
If you have ever done a crossword puzzle in the last 70 years, Asta is in almost all of them because it's a common letter combination and this is the only thing it is. So if they ever say Nick and Nora's dog or Dog of Mystery fame, Asta. I love crossword puzzles. I love how they single-handedly is keeping the Thin Man alive. Anyway, they solved mysteries together, and they had a very lucrative series of films in the 1930s and early 40s. Starred William
Six
Powell,
of them, right?
I think. They starred William Powell and Myrna Loy, who have endless chemistry together. And people remember them fondly, but they kind of disappeared. Yeah. And there haven't been one in a while. There was talk a few years ago about remaking it with Johnny Depp. That fell by the wayside. I would love to see, personally, if the whole thing with Nick and Nora is you have to get endlessly charming people.
Yeah.
You get Oscar Isaac and Lupita Nyong'o.
That would be good.
I think that's a great combination. I think they're more or less the same age, or at least it makes sense to me. And I just want to see them have fun and be charming together and solve mysteries. And that's it. Done.
Justin Timberlake and Anna Kendrick. That's kind of an easy.
Cute.
That's an easy one.
That'd be cute. Yeah. I got nothing against that. That'd be fun.
Zac Efron and Zendaya. They were together in the Greatest Showman.
You want to feel like the Thin Man, The Adventure Begins, where it's just like how they met,
younger versions of them. Why not?
I can see that. I can see doing a young one. Not the end of the world. They don't have to be in their 30s or whatever. That's cute. I can see that.
Zac Efron is in his 30s. Zendaya's pretty young, but yeah.
Is he in his 30s already? I thought he was like in his late 20s.
Nope, he's like 32-ish, I think, isn't he?
That's not late 30s.
Oh, well.
He is 31.
Oh, he's 31.
Or is about to turn 31, I guess. So,
so he's a little younger than
my point is that the Avengers are young, Nick and Nora. I'm fine with that. That'd be fun. I like that.
Zendaya is pretty young, though. She's still like early 20s, I believe.
Here's an email called "You Asked for This."
Oh, did we?
From someone who's written in before, CJ Schwiggity.
Okay.
You might recall in a recent episode we reviewed the movie Space Jam, and we invited our listeners to defend Space Jam, but our caveat was this. You cannot say that Space Jam is a good movie because you liked it when you were a kid or that you just thought it was cute. You have to come with a legitimate reason why, and we said we'll give you time. And we're going to. You have an actual argument for why, if you saw Space Jam for the first time as an adult, you would say it's a good movie. Here's what we got from CJ Swiggity. First off, in all caps, Lunatics Unleashed is an awesome show. You bite your tongue, sirs. But I'm here to defend Space Jam.
Okay, well, I am biting my tongue. All right, here we go.
Yeah, a lot of blood. It's great. I'm here to defend Space Jam.
I come to praise Space Jam, not to bury it. Yeah, all right.
I think Space Jam is a clever dissertation and meta commentary on the very idea how the Looney Tunes have become commercialized properties for corporate extortion. Okay? It's all there. You fools just don't see it! The very premise is a play on this whole idea and gimmick. This film was poking fun at bad ideas before Lord and Miller's balls dropped. It's obvious that Danny DeVito's character represents a corporate body whose targeted audience has grown tired of what's current, so what better than to bring back something tried and true that has proven to work, Enter the Looney Tunes. This process of thinking mirrors our very own climate and blockbuster film rather than trying to come up with something new and different. Mr. Flathead, is that his name? It will simply just repackage a winning formula, i.e. nostalgia. As you've mentioned during this point, the Looney Tunes has dropped into just a corporate merchandise. What a better way to bring them back. Come on, guys, the commentary is sharp. It's all a matter of seeing. It's very much like the Lego Movie or 21 Jump Street, and let's poke fun at this dumb idea, but make an underlying level of realization to it. Okay, here's what I'm going to say to that.
I see what you're getting at.
I see what you're getting at, and I think on some level it's in the text. But as you recall, we talked about earlier in the episode, there's a difference between having an allegory and selling an allegory. And what I think Space Jam does is, I think they touch upon that. I think they are aware that we are talking about corporate exploitation. How could they not be? At some point, someone needed to bring it up. But they don't undermine that. They just do it. They accuse themselves of doing the thing that they're actually doing. They never actually come back around again and do something meaningful with it.
If there's any,
it never becomes more than that.
If there's any self-awareness, it's only given to us in small whiffs, and it would only be included because that was hip at the time, and not because they're actually trying to undermine that notion. Yeah, you can do a satire with that very concept, which would have been great.
Sure.
Especially in 96. You know, the year Scream came out, for goodness sake. So, do that movie. But that's not what Space Jam is. Space Jam is actually just presenting us with the worst of it. And if it were constantly calling attention to the fact that it were as bad as it is, then maybe they could use its own badness as its selling point. But I don't think it really is skilled at doing it. I understand the point that you're trying to make.
You're saying that they're calling their shots. The question is, what are they shooting? And if your whole point is like, hey, look, I'm going to do an art installation in which I rob a bank. And then the whole art installation is you literally rob a bank. You just robbed a bank. You can't say robbing a bank is bad because I did it.
You can't rob a bank ironically, is my point.
You're actually doing the thing that is bad. So I see what you're getting at, and I can appreciate that you see that in there, but I'm arguing that feels like the movie is almost giving itself an excuse to do exactly what it is saying is bad. And it never does anything beyond that. So the Lego Movie goes beyond what it is trying to do, and I appreciate that. I don't think Space Jam does. If you want to say it's an interesting precursor to it, fine, but precursors aren't always necessarily good at the thing that they inspired. But interesting argument. Thank you for sending that in.
Here's a letter from Anna. It says, Hey, Bibbs and Whitney. recently you answered a letter from a Korean listener about subtitles. I am originally from Russia, where up until recently subtitled movies were only art house. I watched the first Avengers in London because I wanted both 3D and the original voice experience. And now living in the Netherlands, where only kid films are dubbed. But since I don't speak Dutch, I can't really watch Arabic or French or German or Japanese, etc., movies in cinemas.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm all for subtitles and never had problems with it, but I wanted to share something with you. Until quite recently, one of the most famous, at least in the internet, Russian film critics, Anton Dolin, asked his colleagues in a Facebook post what do they prefer, dubbing or English or subtitled screenings. To my surprise, most preferred subtitles, even though the majority of moviegoers for whom they will be writing their reviews, will be watching the movies dubbed. And no matter how good the voice actors are, it's still a very different experience. This is a very irresponsible approach, in my opinion. Well, not that I expected Russian film critics to be irresponsible. Thanks for your podcast. May they brighten my rainy Dutch mornings. P.S. 3 Billboards is an amazing movie, and anyone who thinks otherwise is very wrong.
It's interesting, like, I'm talking about 3 Billboards. I was thinking today, because we're recording this before the Oscars have come out. So this might be an interesting conversation to have later. Whichever film wins Best Picture is going to decide what the narrative of the Oscars was.
Yeah.
If Get Out wins Best Picture, everyone's going to be like, holy shit, good for the Oscars. That's pretty, not only was it a horror movie, but it's this really, like, you know, sharp and biting social comedy. It's really cool. If Lady Bird won, everyone's like, wow, good for the Oscars. Picking, like, a really well-crafted slice of life movie from a female perspective, something we don't see a lot of getting rewarded from the Oscars. That's really cool. Shape of Water wins. Wow, that's really interesting. Like, they won this, like, they awarded this monster movie that used, like, horror movie tropes to sort of tell this story about love and acceptance. That's really, really cool. And then if, like, 3 Billboards gets on, everyone would be like, hey! Damn it! Why do you do this really blunt, kind of, like, badly put together? I disagree with you about 3 Billboards. I think there's really good stuff in 3 Billboards, but I think it kind of doesn't pick what it's about very well, and I find it kind of full of a lot of kind of cheap, dramatic cliches, or not cliches, tricks.
Yeah.
Where it's like, what's the most shocking way we can end this scene? And they kind of do that every time, whether or not it actually makes a great narrative. But I can appreciate that it makes an impact. Okay. So that I'll say. Anyway, what do you got?
Here is a letter from Hayden. Okay. A listener wrote in a letter and asked, like, what our favorite premises are, like if it's a premise we always go to, and he says, hello my lovely fellows, on the most recent episode, this was a little while back, you talked about your favorite premises, and I wonder what you would think about mine. I love what I call weird stuff happening in small town genres. This ranges from classics like Close Encounters of the Third Kind to more recent stuff like Stranger Things. I always give bonus points to it if some secret science experiment is going on. This doesn't retain necessarily to hi-fi horror entertainment exclusively. This is probably why Blue Velvet is my favorite David Lynch film. I love the way that film explores the small town genre and does it perfectly. What really draws me to the genre, if you could even call it a genre, is the exploration of small town life. What are some of your favorites of this genre? I kind of like those two because they have walls. Like, you can do whatever you like within sort of the parameters of the small town, and your suspension of disbelief can allow you to believe it actually happens. The Mist is quite a good one. That ends up being, larger than a small town. But yeah, it is about sort of how small town goes crazy when weird, like, mist full of monsters just sort of drifts out over everything. It's another one about a weird small town. Trying to think. I guess we'll get back to you on. Oh, you know what? There's one I really love from a couple of years. I think it came out in 2009 called The White Ribbon. It's a Michael Haneke film about the puritanical elders of the town punish the children by making them wear white ribbons around their arms, sort of like as this visual symbol of shame. And as more kids are punished, we don't really necessarily see a lot of kids commit any sort of crimes. When they do, they're little things like breaking glasses. But more and more damage begins to occur in this town as time passes, and more resentment start to grow, and nobody's really sure who's responsible for all these crimes, and the rules get tighter and tighter and tighter, and the resentment gets higher and higher and higher, and you realize Michael Haneke is telling you an origin story of fascism. Yeah. It's really, really great.
I think there's a couple of maybe rather obvious ones. You look at The Wicker Man.
Oh, there you go.
Which is presented as a bit of a mystery as to why this town is so eccentric, and depending on your point of view, the film is either truly horrifying or only mildly horrifying. it's a fascinating film, and the less you know about I'm talking about the original, not the Nicolas Cage version, which has its own qualities. But the original Wicker Man is fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies of its type. A movie I defend and most people don't. Needful Things.
Oh, there you go.
I think Needful Things is a very good movie.
We're going to Stephen King a lot here. But
Stephen King was good at this. I think one of the things Stephen King has been good at as a storyteller is creating the sense of place. I think he's really good at that. And he creates these communities like we like to revisit, like Castle Rock. They're doing a whole TV show just about Castle Rock as this place where everything happens, which is very on point. But Needful Things is a story about a town that is undone by someone who just comes into the town and gives everyone exactly what they think they want. And as the story goes on, people just start kind of losing it. And to the point where it becomes this element of mass hysteria. And I love that movie. I think there's a longer version of that I hear is even better. Like, it plays more like a TV miniseries. But even the theatrical edition is just a really, really solid story about an interconnected community and how kind of fragile that community can be. It seems like so strong. We have this community, we're all together, but within that community there are all these little antagonisms, all of these little things that divide us, and it doesn't take much to snap it. And I think that's really great. And the book is better, but I think the movie's pretty good.
All it takes is the appearance of the devil.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not a subtle. There's another allegory, but I think that's a rather well handled one. And J.T. Walsh in that movie gives one of his greatest J.T. Walsh performances, and that is saying something.
He's getting a lot of those.
I think that movie's really, really fun. That's one of my favorites of this type.
I can't think of any movies, but
TV is right.
Yeah, I was about to say every 8th episode of Star Trek was that premise because they only had so many sets.
But you look at something like obviously Twin Peaks has that vibe as well, where it's just like everything sure is Erie, Indiana. Like everything's just sort of kind of weird here
in this town.
Why is that? So it's a fun subgenre. You're right. People don't talk about it enough.
Another letter?
Sure.
This one comes from Aaron. Dear Bibbs and Whitney, I'm trying to expand my film horizons. Good for you.
Always a good idea.
By looking abroad. Good for you.
Okay.
I recently dove into the works of Lucio Fulci.
Ooh.
With a little-known work of his called The Devil's Honey. I actually haven't seen The Devil's Honey.
I actually haven't seen that. Fulci was very prolific. You can watch a lot of Fulci and still not catch up.
I found myself enamored with this style of storytelling and wanted to check out some more giallo films. Are there any films or filmmakers you could recommend? Oh, boy, howdy, Aaron, that's a tall order.
It's a very, very big genre that people in America don't always know about enough. Let's start off by giving everyone a little foundation of what a giallo is.
Well, the word giallo translates to yellow, the color yellow, which alludes to the yellowed pages of a pulp novel.
It's actually the cover.
Oh, the cover.
The cover of these pulp novels was frequently yellow, made them pop out of the stage. As a movie, the giallo specifically refers to a predecessor of the slasher genre in which there is a murder mystery, and the murders are insanely graphic and operatic.
Yeah.
That's basically the gist of it.
Super stylized murder movies.
Before Halloween, it kind of transformed what the idea of a slasher is. Most of the American films we think of as early slashers play more like a giallo. You look at the original Friday the 13th, where it is a mystery as to who's really doing it until the end. Or Black Christmas is probably the best example.
Black Christmas,
and even something like Scream actually plays a lot more like a giallo because it really does have that detective element than it does a proper slasher. But in Italy, the giallo was a very prominent genre. You can still see it being made, but usually it's an allusion to earlier films. You have to see the films of Dario Argento.
So
the early films,
if you haven't seen Suspiria or Opera or Inferno or the Animal trilogy, which is Four Flies on Grey Velvet, Cat o' Nine Tails, and Bird with a Crystal Plumage, those are all must sees.
And Deep Red.
And also Deep Red.
I would argue, however, that technically Suspiria and Inferno are not technically giallo films. They just share many of the same qualities. A giallo film, again, has a detective element. Suspiria and Inferno are mystical. They're mystical.
Yeah, that's true.
But all of those other movies are phenomenal, and they're really great.
If you haven't seen Suspiria, see Suspiria.
In many ways, I prefer Inferno. I think they're both brilliant. I think they're both brilliant movies.
I love
Third one, not so much.
Let's see, other filmmaker. Although he's not Italian, Mario Bava made a lot of films sort of in that mold. If you see Bava's Black Sunday at some point, if you can. Twitch of the Death Nerve. Let's see, Umberto Lenzi is another filmmaker to look up.
Is it Lenzi who did Eyeball?
I think that was Lenzie.
Yeah, that's a really fun one that people don't talk about enough. Fulci, again, he's got a huge filmography. I recommend you seek out...
Zombie.
Well, again, not a giallo.
Not a giallo,
you
but
should
see
see
Zombie.
it. I recommend A Lizard in a Woman's Skin. That's a really, really great one. I actually don't recommend Don't Torture a Duckling. That's kind of a big one, but I'm not a big fan of it.
And I think his crown jewel is The Beyond.
Yes, another one that's more supernatural,
more
but it's really great.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of...
also, look up Roger Ebert's review of The Beyond, because he hated it, and it's hilarious.
I'm a big fan of The House by the Cemetery. Which
I've seen that one.
Doesn't make sense and kind of
yeah.
does. And I love how hypnotically, unapologetically weird it is. Oh, God, there's a whole bunch. That's a start. If you want some more like recent takes on it, I highly recommend the last couple of films. Oh God, one second. Let me make sure I get their names right.
Okay.
I recommend looking up A Mare and The Strange Color of Your Body's Tears by filmmakers Hélène Catet and Bruno Forzani.
Okay.
They do their own take on the giallo, very contemporary take on the giallo, and they are fascinating. I recommend watching them in that order, A Mare and Strange Colors, because Strange Color is...
spell A Mare for them.
Amer.
Okay.
Strange Color of Your Body's Tears is wild and hallucinogenic and completely insane. Whereas A Mare is actually almost like a coming-of-age story version of a giallo. And it's a lot more... It's very oddly presented, but like it's much more like tame in comparison. So I recommend watching them in that order, or A Mare might seem like a bit of a step down. They're both fantastic. Those are both great.
So yeah, Lenzie, Bavo, Argento, Fulci, I guess, are sort of...
And Argento.
I said Argento.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and lately Hélène Catet and Bruno Forzani. They're really great.
Here's a letter from Carlos. Hey, Bibbs and Whitney, big fan of the podcast. The two of you talking movies has helped keep me from going crazy because of the endless streams of college papers I keep getting. Hang in there.
You can do it.
I'm currently taking a class on Japanese directors. My professor made us watch Kenzo Mizoguchi's Ugetsu. I think it's amazing and made me want to ask you of some of your favorite ghost story films and why American ghost story films are usually just horror when filmmakers from other countries do more with these stories. An example that comes to mind is Alejandro Amenabar's The Others.
Great movie.
Thank you for answering my question and keep being awesome, Carlos. Push off.
It all depends on what you're kind of looking for from ghost stories, and different cultures have different relationships with the idea of not just the supernatural but the spirit after it dies. Different cultures are more accepting of that, and they think of the dead as living with us regularly. Other cultures, like sort of the American culture, think of that as either a fantasy or something that's actually kind of disturbing to think about. So different cultures approach it from different perspectives. I'm a big fan of the way Guillermo del Toro handles it in The Devil's Backbone, where it's a story about you got the Spanish Civil War, but also just individual violence infecting everyone left over at this school. That's a great movie.
I'm really fond. Well, who isn't really fond of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining?
Of course.
That's an American filmmaker. About sort of the way violence can sort of seep into the walls around us. And I know that's the basic premise behind every haunting, but Kubrick just makes it feel very real, like you're living inside of the mind of this thing. And Americans can do it. I think there's definitely different cultural things going on.
And there's also different expectations of genre.
America's sort of obsession with... relatively speaking, we're a very young country, and we're sort of in this eternal adolescence where we don't think we're going to die, and we're going to keep on charging on through.
Nothing can happen to America.
And so,
we've only been around for a couple hundred years. Yeah, something can happen to America.
Death is viewed as something that's something that is often ignored and is to be feared, and is rarely folded into the natural progression of life.
And also something that we can sort of kind of glance over. Think about when you were young, depending on how old you are. If you're not like a teenager or like early 20s right now, the way that a lot of people, when they're young, look at death in a motion picture is
kind of something abstract.
It's rather flip, unless you've experienced a lot of it in your life. And if you have, I'm very sorry. That sucks. That's tragic. But a lot of times when you're young, death is kind of a concept. But when you have death in your life and you actually like experience more of it, and you understand the fear and the grief and the difficult understanding and the enlightenment that comes with an awareness of death, it changes, which is why older filmmakers tend to have different perspectives on films with like a lot of violence. Older filmmakers and also older critics. But there's a lot of fun movies here. There's a movie I want to recommend that doesn't get talked about enough because it came out around the same time as The Sixth Sense. Stir of Echoes.
Stir of Echoes is pretty good.
It's a rock solid motion picture.
Working class ghost story.
Yeah, I like it because like there's a lot of like ghost stories where like it all takes place in big castles, or it takes place among the affluent, and the idea is our house is haunted, and
the idea there is like even your wealth won't save you. It's like,
exactly.
You can be as rich as you like. There's still evil in there.
What I like in Stir of Echoes is Kevin Bacon is hypnotized at a party, and it unlocks an ability to sort of experience the supernatural, and then it completely changes his whole life. And it doesn't necessarily change it for the better. He doesn't just become enlightened.
He starts going a little crazy. He sees these things.
He starts missing work, and they don't know if they can afford to keep their house. Like, this is a practical concern. That's a really, really good movie. I don't think gets enough play, and I think it's a better than average American horror story.
There's Catherine Erb plays his wife in that movie, and she's great in that film. But anyway, Stir of Echoes is quite good.
Stir of Echoes is quite good. What's another one I really like? This one is like I think this is the ultimate ghost story, and I think that when we think of like the haunted house story, the movie we're thinking of is The Legend of Hell House. The Legend of Hell House is everything you think a haunted house story is, and it does it crazy well. It's about a bunch of British researchers going into a house to try to prove the supernatural is real. It is great. Like, it is so well shot and like spooky and scary and awesome.
Give me William Castle any old day.
But then you have something really light, like The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, which is sweet. It's a sweet movie about a woman. Her husband dies. She gets her own little house by the sea. The house is supposedly haunted, and she meets the ghost in the house, who is an old sailor played by Rex Harrington.
Rex Harrison?
Harrison.
You said Harrington.
I said Kit Harrington earlier. I don't know how I did that.
Rex Harrison.
I'm not going to cut that out. I'm just going to be apologetic about that. But the great Rex Harrison, you know him from My Fair Lady. And he's the salty man of the sea. And he ends up being in this. He kind of falls in love with the woman who owns the house now, and in a way, she kind of falls in love with him. But they realize he's a ghost, and they just sort of put it aside. But at some point, she's going to die. And they might actually be together. It's actually a very sweet and tender love story about a love that we know might be consummated someday, but she's got to live her whole life without it. And it's a really interesting, nice little tale. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough. I think it's really good. Anyway, we could do a whole podcast on nothing but the best ghost stories ever. So, do you want to leave it there? You want to do one more?
Let's do one more.
Last one.
This one is from Michael. Hi, Michael. Hey, Whitney and William. How are you? Good, thank you.
Okay.
So my question is, can you guys resist the urge to check your phone while watching a movie at home? Do you guys take any precautions, or have you always been able to lock in on the movie? Or maybe is it due to the era you grew up in? Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Michael. Well, I'm in a theater. I don't check my phone.
Oh, your phone should be off.
Because that's rude.
Your phone should be off in the theater.
There was an instance where I was in a theater by myself. And I was
literally the only one in the theater?
The only one in the theater, and I was like getting up and moving seats, and I was doing jumping jacks in the aisle, and I didn't do this because it's a crime, but I pointed my camera at the screen, thinking, should I start like taking pictures of the screen and tweeting them just to show?
I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah,
I'm glad you resisted.
I get in trouble with the federal government with that, but I had my phone out and was just sort of like checking it because who cares at that point?
Yeah.
Otherwise, no. When I'm at home, just concentrate. Just put your phone down.
Well, I think it varies for me. If I've seen the movie before, like I'm just sort of refamiliar with it, I'm just watching it for fun. I don't care.
Yeah,
I'm watching Step Up 3D for the millionth time. I'll be on my phone because I don't care. I've seen it. If it's new, I try not to look at it. But sometimes it buzzes, and you think to yourself, "Oh God, is that important? Is that for work?" You might take a quick look at it. But especially if you're reviewing it, you try to focus. You try to focus. You do what you can. But you're right. When at home, the etiquette is different. There's no real rule against it, and so you might sometimes. I'm not saying I've never done it.
That's always been one of the big complaints about watching home video, even before smartphones were a thing. You're at home. all your stuff is there. You got a book next to you. You have magazines. You have toys and things you can fidget with. Your kitchen is right there.
Hell, think about it. Like, you can pause it and go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
That interrupts the narrative flow of the movie.
And some filmmakers like David Lynch hate that you can kind of skip around, whereas other filmmakers like David Cronenberg says, oh no, now that we have DVDs, you can kind of remix your own movie. You can re-edit it home, and that's really great because we have this tech. And some they're filmmakers from completely different camps.
I think David Lynch once had a thing where he didn't want his movies to have chapter stops.
And a lot of his DVDs don't.
You want to just watch it all the way through. There's no chapter to it. I would have put a chapter in if I wanted a chapter in it. This is a movie. You sit down and you watch it.
And also, people say, how come you haven't done a commentary track? Why do we need to I made a film.
Yeah, the film should
That's
speak
the
for
commentary.
itself. Yeah.
The film is the commentary.
It's nice to have a commentary track, but they're under no obligation to give you one. They wanted to let it lay.
My favorite commentary tracks are the ones that aren't by the filmmakers, because they'll just be talking about, oh, remember that was fun to shoot, and there was some guy behind that hut when we were shooting Conan, and he was vomiting because he had bad berries. Like, I don't need to know that about when I'm watching Conan.
One of my favorite commentary tracks ever is the commentary track for Seven Samurai on the Criterion Collection. Yeah. That is, you will learn everything about that movie.
Especially on all of the ones on the Criterion Collection are done by scholars. Peter Cowie does most of some, but Peter Cowie does all of the commentary tracks for the Bergman films because he's a Bergman scholar. He knows all of the details. Bergman is saying what he wants to say. I don't need another Bergman underneath that commenting on what he's commenting on. Bergman gave it to me already. Yeah. But Peter Cowie can give me some more insight.
But I do think commentary tracks can be fun as well, just because they can give you an insight into the production of a movie from like a historical perspective, or if you're interested in the way films are made. There's no reason. The commentary tracks aren't bad. Yeah. But if you don't have one, and you think your movie just stands by itself, that's your call as a filmmaker.
If you find that whenever you put on a movie at home, that at some point along the way, no matter what the film is, you stop watching and just start checking your phone. Turn your phone off, put it in another room, do something active to stop yourself from doing that. You know what? If you're determined to watch the film.
If you got to fidget with something, you get a fidget spinner or something. Yeah. Something to do with your hands. I appreciate that.
Silly putty. Get silly putty.
I have a lot of nervous habits. I bite my nails a lot at a movie theater. Not because I'm like a cartoon character in suspense going... Just because I like to have something to do physically, it helps me concentrate. Yeah. Oftentimes I find myself just chewing a straw or something. Like actually pick some straws out to chew on, just because it helps me concentrate a little bit. Yeah, at home, there's a lot of distractions. You might want to find something.
You might have seen me transform my drinking cup into a glove. I tend to do that in theaters. Like I'll drink the water and I'll just start playing with the cup and I'll start crunching it and chewing on it, and eventually it'll like make its way onto my fist and like form around my fingers. Maybe I should sell those. Get your own drinking cup gauntlets just in time for the Infinity Gauntlet. God. This one says Pepsi on it. It's the Pepsi gem.
But yeah, no, everyone watches movies differently, and again, people watch movies with different levels of intensity, and people watch different movies with different levels of intensity. Sometimes I live tweet movies at home, but I only do that if I'm never going to review it, or if I've already seen it a bunch of times. Yeah. Because again, I'm not like ruining. I know the experience. Yeah. Now I can kind of look at it piecemeal, and that's okay. So that is critically acclaimed.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, everyone, you're awesome. Thank you so much. Again, you can hear me on the Schmoedown Rundown podcast as well if you want to find out more about the Schmoedown stuff. You can hear us every week on Cancel Too Soon, the podcast where we review television series that lasted only one season or less. This month, all throughout the month of March, we were reviewing television series about human cops and robot partners. There's a lot of those.
A whole month worth.
And they never do well. So we're going to be reviewing the hell out of them. And that's going to be a lot of fun there. You can always email us, criticallyacclaimedfans@gmail.com. If you want to leave us comments on the SK Plus YouTube page of this episode, we do try to read them. But again, we really respond to the stuff you send us in email because it encourages everyone to be more detailed. It's not an immediate reaction. It's a real communication, like a real, like a statement. You know, it's official.
Says something more than first.
Yeah. Well, people say more than that, but you know what I mean? It's just like, I like this episode, and thank you. That really helps, and we do pay attention as much as we can to everything you say. So that's really, really awesome. You can find me on Twitter at William Bibbiani.
I'm at Witney Seibold. Witney has no H in it, and Seibold is spelled with an EI. I don't know, that's weird.
And next week, we'll be back with reviews of A Wrinkle in Time, The Strangers, Pray at Night, The Hurricane Heist, Gringo, and The Outsider. So another big, big week. At some point, we'll talk about the Oscars. Maybe before our next episode, we might do a bonus episode. And the big, supposedly bad movie we're going to be reviewing next week is going to be a disaster film of some kind, and you can vote for that on the Schmoeville Facebook page as of right now.
That's Schmoeville with an exclamation point.
Yeah, there's
by
a
the
couple.
way. There's
That's
a
confusing.
couple. Yeah, it's a little confusing.
Find the one with the exclamation point. Sign up. The polls go live every Sunday morning, and make your voice heard. So thank you everybody for listening, and never forget, everyone's a critic.
I want to go to the midnight show. I'm sorry, what?